Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm, and you are watching What If Naruto was captured by Orochimaru in Forest of Death. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Always sitting number time. Let's start the story.
The Forest of Death echoed with the sound of battle, as Genin teams engaged in death-defying combat over something as trivial as a scroll in order to advance to the next round of this tournament of death. Teenagers killed others in cold blood. The harsh reality for those who aspire to be shinobi is that they must kill people when instructed to do so, seduce people when instructed to seduce them, and even betray their own teammates when directed to do so. Of course, some people wouldn't kill someone else to advance in this harsh world. Naruto Uzumaki was one of those boys. He was always the one who could make people smile in the emotionless world of a shinobi. He was constantly trying to make new friends and was always the first to step in when someone was being teased. Many people believed he would never make it in the violent world of the shinobi because of his unusually cheerful personality, but he repeatedly disproved their predictions. He persisted through every adversity, grew stronger with each experience, and transformed people's hearts with each battle. When it came to the young boy, the one question that no one could answer was why. Why did he always have such a strong will? He wanted to be a shinobi, but why? Why was he willing to put his happiness and health at risk in order to assist a total stranger? All of these questions could have their answers in his early years. Fear governed every aspect of his life: the fear of suffering harm, the worry about being ignored, the fear of being thrown out like trash from yesterday, and above all, the fear of loneliness. All of these anxieties resulted from the events that transpired the night before his birth. He was taken from his mother's arms shortly after birth and made to bear a burden that would make his life, if he lived at all, a living hell. He had no choice but to keep the Kyuubi, the strongest of the 9 Biju. A malevolent chakra. Being this insignificant incident would not only put him in danger of suicide several times during his early years, but it would also make him the target of those who would try to use Naruto as a prisoner for their own evil schemes. Naruto is in a similar situation right now. Naruto was worn out and his arms were burning from strain. He was exerting every effort to prevent a huge snake from devouring his rival and best friend Sasuke. While Sasuke was recuperating, he was keeping the snake at bay with 2 kunai implanted in its skull disguised as a genin. Orochimaru was simply laughing softly, utterly thrilled that his scheme was at last being realized. "Come on, Teme. Are you telling me that is all you have left?" Naruto was cowering in terror a few feet away from Sasuke, who was perched on a tree branch. He had not experienced such potent chakra signatures since the Uchiha massacre. Sweat trickled down his face as he glanced up at his blonde teammate. "Why are you fighting? We are just going to die. We can't do anything. He's just toying with us." With a sudden surge of strength, Naruto pushed the enormous snake back, but he soon had to steady himself before he fell off the tree branch. He approached Sasuke and gave him a forceful slug in the jaw. Jolted off his knees, Sasuke landed on the branch. His jaw tightened as he glanced up at Naruto. Naruto's normally blue eyes had a black slit down the center and were blood red. His hand was balled in a fist, trembling with anger, and his odd whisker-like birthmarks were much larger and more defined than usual. "Lister here, you bastard. Give up if you want. Die if you want. I don't give a shit anymore. I cannot, and will not, die here." Sasuke was left on the branch as Naruto turned around and leapt after Orochimaru. Orochimaru was amusedly watching the performance in front of him. "The best part is that this will spare me countless hours of mental and physical torment, even though I didn't anticipate the Kyuubi's chakra to reveal itself just yet. Oh well, I suppose I'd better get going before snooping begins." Orochimaru simply moved his neck to avoid Naruto's kick to his head. He reared his arm back and grabbed Naruto's shoulder. He gave Naruto a hard punch to the stomach with all of his strength, pushing up anything he hadn't already broken down. Holding the back of Naruto's neck, he allowed him to go limp in his hand. He smirked as he flung Naruto into the air and called forth a snake to ingest the blonde. Orochimaru smirked as he turned to face Sasuke, who was still trembling on the tree branch, as the snake unsummoned itself. "Well, Sasuke-kun, as much fun as this whole ordeal has been, I have to leave. I have a lot of work to do, and I am just lightheaded with excitement." Orochimaru leapt in Sasuke's direction and raised his head to meet his. "Tell that old fool of a Hokage that his time of reckoning will soon be upon him, and I'll use Naruto to do it." Orochimaru left the 2 downed genin in a whirl of leaves, mentally bracing himself for the difficult task that lay ahead. Naruto slowly regained consciousness, blinking his weary eyes multiple times. "My brain, why am I feeling so dizzy?" Naruto was unable to move his arms, so he tried to rub his head. Wah? Panicked, he attempted to get to his feet but was also unable to do so. What the hell? He looked down when he raised his head and saw that he was strapped to a metal table, but despite his best efforts, his restraints remained in place. His limbs became more and more tightly bound the more he attempted to break them with chakra, and after a few seconds he began to feel dizzy. Tisk tisk Naru-kun. Don't use up too much of your chakra just yet, you're going to need it, trust me. When Naruto turned to face the recognizable voice, he noticed a man who looked like the genin he had battled in the forest. Who are you? Where am I? What do you want with me? The man merely grinned. In the order you asked, I am Orochimaru, one of the Sannin. As to where you are, well, I would estimate you are about 500 meters underground, about 5 miles outside of Konoha. Your last question though, well, that one is a surprise. Naruto began to scream for assistance and demand to be released from his restraints. As he struggled more against them, his screams only made the pale man laugh and made his voice strain. Orochimaru's smile stretched from ear to ear when a man with silver hair and glasses entered a few minutes later and whispered something in her ears. Orochimaru approached the table to which Naruto was fastened. Well, my dear Naru-kun, my assistant just informed me that your little team managed to alert the Hokage about your abduction, so we are a little short on time. Fortunately, all the preparations are ready. Now the fun can finally begin. He pointed Naruto's attention to the far side of the wall with a wave of his hand. The wall started to lower itself as Naruto glanced across the room, revealing an odd collection of enormous glass-holding tubes. What appeared to be sand was contained in the tube on the far right, and it swirled as though it had its own will. There were a lot of blue flames in the next tube, and they continued to burn without any fuel. The next tube contained what appeared to be tiny pieces of some kind of shell suspended in water. The hair in the next tube was a big tuft of deep crimson. The next tube contained what appeared to be a portion of a very large hoof, similar to those found on cows or bulls. A pool of transparent fluid-like residue, similar to what a snail or slug would produce, was contained in the following tube. A piece of brittle shell-like material, like the exoskeleton a bug would shed, was found in the next tube. There appeared to be a large slab of squid in the last tube. Naruto's gaze shifted between the odd tubes and Orochimaru. Orochimaru simply grabbed a scalpel and laughed evilly. Images of what the strange man would do to Naruto flashed through his mind, and his eyes widened in terror. Now Naru-kun, try not to scream too loud, I don't want you to rip your vocal cords, I would prefer to be able to speak when I take over your body. The underground lab was filled with heart-stopping screams for the next few hours. As soon as Sasuke told the Hokage about the strange encounter with the snake genin, the alarms in Konoha started to go crazy. Sarutobi didn't summon all of the shinobi in Konoha to conduct a search until he heard Orochimaru's final words. Even those who still harbored animosity toward the boy made every effort to find out where he was. Even they appeared to be aware of the risks involved in allowing a madman to experiment on a Jinchuriki, particularly if the madman stated that he intended to burn Konoha to the ground. All of the competitors, living or dead, were gathered to protect themselves from Orochimaru's grasp after the Chunin exams were abruptly postponed. Even though everyone knew that this was just a front to free up more Junin to look for Naruto, appearances still had to be maintained. Nara Shikaku himself assembled the 5-person teams, each consisting of a Byakugan. User time was of the essence, and every minute that passed meant that Orochimaru had to tamper with Kyuubi's seal and run the risk of releasing it once more. Nobody realized how much more sinister Orochimaru's true actions were. In a strange turn of events, the person who found Naruto was the one who stood to lose the most from his passing, because her Byakugan was one of the few that was powerful enough to see that far underground to find Naruto. She was one of the few people who, by the same stroke of luck, would have been able to find him. Along with Hitaki Kakashi, the Cat Anbu member, Tokubetsu Junin Mitarashi Anko, and Nara Shikamaru as a strategist, Hinata was assigned to a retrieval team. Does that mean that it's him? Kakashi-sensei? I found him? The cycloptic Junin hurried to the Byakugan user, bringing the whole party to a sudden stop. Hinata, where is he? She winced and considered stuttering her answer, but she had a gut feeling that this was not the moment to be constrained by some foolish childhood habit. He is 1,400 meters northeast, about 600 meters underground. The entrance is hidden via Genjutsu and is disguised as a felled oak tree. From what I saw, there are no other chakra signatures in the compound. With a nod, Kakashi, Kat, and Anko hurried to the entrance to warn others of their location. Kakashi launched a huge Gokakyu, Grand Fireball, into the air as they fled. Meanwhile, Hinata started to breathe heavily and had to balance herself on a nearby tree. Fortunately, she was saved by the other genin. Hinata-san, breath inhale through your nose and exhale out of your mouth. We need to get going. Naruto needs our help. She was able to get started helping the one person who never called her weak or a failure, because the mere mention of his name seemed to calm her down enough. Kakashi waited for the 2 genin to rejoin the group while seated near the newly exposed entrance. Even though he didn't want them to have to risk their lives, the fact was that he needed them, Hinata in particular. Kakashi displayed his Sharingan by raising his Hite 8. Hinata, I need you to keep your Byakugan active. Take us on the shortest route to Naruto. The group ran into the complex. After the girl nodded, she led them down the corridors and through a number of passageways that were designed to trap anyone unfamiliar with the layout in the labyrinth and confuse them, but it was not too difficult for a Byakugan user. Hinata started to notice something as they drew nearer. Kakashi-sensei? The group stopped moving. What is it, Hinata? In order to calm herself, she inhaled. There is something wrong with NN Naruto-kun's chakra eye. It's pitch black. The worry Kakashi attempted to conceal on his face was visible in his eyes. Take us to him. After the girl gave a nod, they resumed their journey through the night. The group stopped outside a big metal door, and everyone looked for the indication that the room was clear from the only person who could see past the door. From what I can see, it's just N Naruto-kun in there. No one was ready for what was about to happen, but they all nodded and rushed through the door. Shikamaru turned around and puked after taking one look. Hinata collapsed to the ground and started crying uncontrollably. Anko and Kat looked away from the hideous scene in front of them. The only person who managed to move past the scene and confront his pupil was Kakashi, but even he was crying as he confronted his worst nightmare. A very pale Naruto with an incision from just above his ribcage all the way down to his pant line lay on a table covered in crimson blood. In the center of the room there were numerous tiny tubes and needles that extended past his ribs and appeared to be connected to his various internal organs, and his skin was peeled back like a banana. Using his eyes, Kakashi followed the tubes back to the far side of the room, where 8 enormous container tubes that appeared to have just been drained were located. Kakashi started to shudder uncontrollably and raised a hand to his face. Oh Kami. I've let him down. Why? Then Sensei, then Obito and Rin, and now him. Since there was too much blood for Naruto to be alive, Kakashi walked up to his pupil and tentatively placed his fingers on his neck to confirm his death. Whoa. Dub. Impossible. Everyone's eyes were glassy as they looked up as he searched for a sewing tool. Kakashi attempted to put the skin flaps back in their original positions. He's alive. In a chorus of screams and shouts, everyone leapt to their feet and hurried to the blonde's side. Hinata was the only one who saw his eyes open, and the now deluded cerulean eyes focused on her pallid eyes when he whispered something. Everyone instantly stopped talking. Hinata-chan, please. When he spoke, everyone fell silent. Ignoring the shyness that had previously hampered her life, Hinata took his hand in hers. What is it, N Naruto-kun? He muttered something in response. Hinata pressed her ear against his lips. Gomen N Naruto-kun. I couldn't hear why you. Tears rolled down Naruto's cheeks as he swallowed a lump. Please, help me. Before Naruto was finally in a hospital room, it had taken another hour and 17 minutes for another shinobi team to reach the entrance where he was being held. Only trusted medical personnel were permitted in the Hokage's room by direct order, but that night things changed. Sarutobi was reflecting on the day's events while seated in his office chair. The good news ended there. Even though he was able to bring Naruto back to health, he still didn't know what Orochimaru had done to Naruto, or where he or any of his subordinates were. Naruto was informed by those who looked into the lab where he was discovered that Orochimaru had changed Naruto's chakra pathways, but they were unsure of how or why. He had no idea that things would soon get considerably worse. When Naruto finally woke up and saw that he was in a warm, cozy bed, a wave of relief overcame him because he was no longer in that hellhole. I never want to experience anything similar again. Sitting up, Naruto surveyed his empty room. On the table beside him was a single card with a vase of lavenders, and there was a chair beside his bed. Both the card and the table next to him were just out of reach when he attempted to reach for them in order to read them. He sighed as he glanced down at his bed and saw what appeared to be an indentation where someone had rested their head for a while before dozing off. It appears that I simply missed the person who must have spent a lot of time here. Whoever held my hand is still warm, but who might it have been? GG. Perhaps Iruka-sensei. But I doubt he could have stayed here for so long. I'm positive it wasn't Sakura or Sasuke, but then who was it? He unconsciously recalled the lab he was in and the tortures he endured as he attempted to consider who could have possibly cared about him enough to be by his side for that long. With tears streaming down his face, Naruto hugged his legs and brought his knees to his chest in a fetal position. Why must all these horrible things always happen to me? I just want to be like everyone else. All I want is for someone to be concerned about me. Dear Kami, I may throw up at any moment. This pity party is over. You had better start behaving like a shinobi since you were one. Naruto leapt to his feet, but when his legs failed him, he staggered to the ground. Leaning against his bed, he looked around the room after getting himself up off the floor. Who's there? For a few seconds there was awkward silence. You have no idea who I am? However, since this is our first conversation, I can't say that I'm overly shocked. Naruto searched his mind for a potential solution to the puzzle he had set for himself. Kyuubi? A dark chuckle rang out. You were so close. It's unfortunate you would have been correct less than a day ago, but unfortunately, time fools everyone. No, to respond to you, the Kyuubi has been dead for a day or so, and I am not him. Additionally, you can communicate with me simply by expressing your thoughts. You don't have to speak out loud. We wouldn't want people listening in on us, would we? Naruto paused to consider the words of this enigmatic voice. Well, who are you if you're not the Kyuubi? Naruto sensed that the response he received was dripping with pure laughter. Throughout history, I have been referred to by a variety of names, including Shinju, Tree of Life, and Yggdrasil. Although my name is irrelevant, you can call me Jubi for convenience. You should be able to understand that name on its own. Naruto's gaze expanded. T10. However, how? There were only 9, based on what I've been able to read. Naruto had a deep laugh in his head. Pray, tell me, how much do you really think mortals like you could learn about gods like the Biju? Are you that stupid, or are you just naive? Silently, Naruto hung his head. Don't expect me to hold your hand and pamper you. I won't. Since you are my new vessel, you will conduct yourself with the honor and pride that come with the job. Unsteadily, Naruto climbed back into his bed. What position? I asked. There was silence for another moment. What are you discussing? Are you not the heir to the Otsutsuki Hagoromo? Naruto cocked his head, perplexed. Who is that? A brief pause was followed by a series of profanities. Don't you tell me that the Rakudo Senin's actions have been forgotten. I will not tolerate this insult to my reputation or self. Sheepishly, Naruto scratched his head. Sorry, Jubi-sama, but the only information we have about the Rakudo Senin is that he was a monk who taught people jutsu and chakra while traveling the world centuries ago. Naruto's thoughts were filled with a deep sigh. It is only natural for some events to be forgotten because you mortals are subject to the passage of time. However, it is almost offensive to disregard his entire body of work. Tell me your name before I start correcting this error, mortal. Naruto smiled. The name is Naruto Uzumaki, and I'll be Hokage someday. A laugh was heard. And Uzumaki? I recall Hagoromo's travels and your kind. They were a vibrant group. And to think they broke away from those senju was astounding. Whatever, I will only say this once. So young Naruto, pay close attention. For the next 30 minutes, Jubi recounted the world's origins and the wars that quickly swept the world until one Otsutsuki Kagaya consumed a forbidden fruit and acquired what is now known as chakra. She gave birth to a son who also had chakra and used her godlike abilities to put an end to the wars. The Jubi attempted to regain its stolen power at this point, but Kaguya's son, who became the Shodem Jinchuriki of the Jubi, sealed the deal. With his newfound prominence, he traveled the world teaching the basics of jutsu and chakra to prevent conflict and enhance humankind's quality of life. Naruto was pleased to discover that jutsu was initially developed to aid people and that its use as a means of death was only later adopted. Hagoromo divided Jubi into 9 distinct entities on his deathbed in order to stop it from reincarnating into the world, but he prophesied that the day would come when they would all be reunited and restored to wholeness. His prophecy appears to have come true, and Naruto was now expected to complete his task and bring about a new era of peace. Naruto was quiet for a while after the Jubi was over. Are you okay, young Naruto? You've been extremely silent for a while now. Naruto gave a snort. What am I supposed to say? In addition to being the next Rakudo Senin on a mission to save the world, you just told me that I have a god sealed inside of me. How in the hell does anyone respond to that? I said I wanted to be Hokage, but I don't think I'm ready to be the Rakudo Senin. All I wanted was to be a normal boy, live a good life, and maybe start a family if someone was willing to have me. I don't believe I deserve such a title. In his mind, Naruto heard what sounded like a clapping sound. Mortal, congratulations. Your first test has been successfully completed. Naruto blinked. Test? Yes, test. There have been at least a dozen other people who have had all Biju united in their being before. So you weren't the first to be in this special situation. Although they were all assigned the same task, they were all tempted by the power and instantly had visions of ruling over others in their heads. They failed the first test as a result, and I ripped them to pieces. Naruto swallowed. However, you were the first to exhibit the humility required to serve as my vessel. Since Hagoromo was the first to possess this trait, I refrained from challenging him for dominance. You earned some of my respect by acknowledging that you weren't deserving, even though I had previously stated that you would need to earn it. While boasting about one's strengths is relatively simple, admitting one's weaknesses is oddly challenging. Naruto gave himself permission to smile a little. I'm grateful, Jubi-sama. A low laugh was heard. I just tell the truth. I'm not looking to flatter in an aimless manner. Rest for the moment. Even though I know you have a lot of questions before you are prepared for your mission, I have a lot of work to do. Naruto's eyebrow went up. Work? Can I be of any assistance? Naruto sensed the smirk on Jubi's face. I'm grateful for your offer, but I have to turn it down. To manage my power, I must first fortify your inner coils and harden your body. Secondly, I will alter your eyes to enable you to employ my methods. Finally, I will share what I know with you. It will be up to you after I prepare you to take on the role of the Rakudo Sennin, both mentally and physically. Just keep in mind that having divine authority is a unique responsibility that has the potential to corrupt weaker minds. I will destroy you and find someone else who is worthy of my power if I ever decide you are not. Naruto smiled. Don't be concerned, Jubi-sama. I promise that I won't let you down, and I never break my word. But will I be able to speak with you again before you leave? When you're done, I would really like to speak with you again. A laugh of amusement was heard. You have no idea how long I have been waiting for a vessel of value, so you can see that you don't worry about your next query. We will continue to communicate, and you are always welcome to ask me for advice. I will go into a dormant state after I finish and won't awaken unless you specifically call for me. Even though I am still a part of you, I want to start soon, so go to sleep now. When Naruto closed his eyes, he felt joy for the first time in a long time. Hello, Jubi-sama. When Hinata entered Naruto's hospital room, he was in the same position as when she had left him, but he appeared strangely calm, more so than he had been in the previous few days. For the last 4 days, she had remained by his side, only ever getting up to go to the bathroom or grab a bite to eat. She even slept in the chair while holding his hand and resting her head on his bed. She may not have found the position particularly comfortable, but those were the most restful nights she had ever experienced. When she started to suspect that Naruto needed a bath on the 3rd day following his hospital admission, she called a nurse because the room smelled strongly of body odor. She was embarrassed to learn that Naruto had been bathed earlier that morning, proving that he wasn't the source of the foul odor. She hurried back to the Hyuga compound to clean herself, and as she was getting ready to take a shower, she noticed that her undershirt smelled extremely ripe. Overall, Hinata demonstrated a great deal of tenacity in spending as much time with Naruto as was humanly feasible. She had even nearly gotten into a fight with a certain nurse who stupidly attempted to persuade her to leave after visiting hours ended. It goes without saying that the nurse quickly discovered that even the most obedient kittens still had claws. She was adamant about supporting Naruto, her inspiration, her light, and her other half. Her dreams were haunted by the image of him on that table, folded open like the pages of a book. She was a ninja, so she was accustomed to seeing injuries, even if they weren't as severe as his. It wasn't that he had been hurt, no, it was because she was so intensely afraid of losing her blonde lover that she hardly slept at all. She collected all the courage she could muster and hardened her resolve. This was it. She would finally express her feelings to him when he woke up and walked by his side through good times and bad. She brushed her hand down his cheek, and through his hair she noticed a raised red vertical line at the base of his neck, which she knew extended to just above his hips. A tear trickled down her cheek, but she forced herself to stop. Over the last few days, all of the tears had dried up. No more. I won't be weak anymore. I will finally be strong, if not for myself then for him all. She saw an odd black haze begin to emerge from Naruto's stomach. It began to move up Naruto's body just as she was ready to call for assistance. As it coagulated on Naruto's eyes and completely absorbed into his eye sockets, she watched in morbid fascination with his eyes still closed. Naruto used his forearms to push himself upright while she stared with wide eyes. He looked in her direction. That scent. So, you were the one who has stayed by my side for so long. Why is that, Hyuga Hinata? Are you here on orders from the Hokage? His question made her flush, but she had at last the confidence to say what she had always wanted to say, and she had no intention of breaking her word now. Anyo, and no one told me to be here. I wanted to stay with you because. One of her favorite sights, Naruto's eyes fluttering open, caused her to stop. When she finally saw those big blue eyes, a tiny smile appeared on her face. They were like endless oceans, and she could lose herself in them. And then she saw something that made her unable to speak. His iris started to spread out, and concentric circles started to form all over his blue eyes, which grew darker and deeper violet. It was the most magnificent shade of purple she had ever seen. For a brief moment, right before the sun rose in the morning, it appeared to be the color of the sky. His transformation didn't stop there. On the circle nearest his eye's center, 3 tiny tomos emerged. It resembles Sasuke-san's Sharingan exactly. Naruto looked down at his hands as he raised them, palms up. He looked up at a still frozen Hinata and said, "Only the first 3, huh? I guess it would be asking too much to have them fully matured in such a short time. Pity. I looked forward to the reactions when people finally them. I must thank you for staying with me for so long, Hyuga-san, and making sure I was healing properly. I truly did not expect anyone to care enough to stay as long as you have without explicit orders to do so, but once again I ask, why?" Hinata was devastated, N Naruto-kun. W what happened to your eyes? And US sound D different? Naruto's eyes returned to their typical deep blue color, and he laughed. Simple. I have finally accepted my destiny, and as such certain changes have occurred. Hinata scowled. Anyo, I'm glad that why you have accepted UD destiny. Whatever that means. B but please C call me H Hinata. Naruto gave a nod. My apologies Hinata-san better? Hinata grinned. W would you C call me H Hinata C-chan? She was perspiring when she noticed Naruto's furrowed brow, but then a broad smile appeared on his face, and he gave her one of those smiles that made her day. So my assumption was correct, you do have a certain degree of urge towards me. Hinata blushed and gave a submissive nod. P please don't P put it like T that. It's much M more than J just a you urge. You make me S sound like Kiba-kun. With a nod, Naruto patted down beside him and extended his legs over the bed, gesturing for her to take a seat beside him. After a brief moment of hesitation, she moved forward and sat down beside him. Painfully aware that he had only previously acknowledged her feelings, she was concentrating on the ground, but she looked up when Naruto took her hand. He smiled brightly at her. Tears were streaming from her eyes as she turned to face the ground, but a finger beneath her chin raised her head to face Naruto. Pardon me, Hinata-chan, I don't mean to make you sad, but I don't believe I can reciprocate your feelings at this time. Hinata closed her eyes halfway in shock, then threw her arms around his neck in a heartbreaking embrace and buried her face in his chest. But that doesn't mean I'm not prepared to learn, though. If you are willing to be patient with me, I will do everything in my power to discover if I can learn to return those feelings. Her unexpected show of affection startled Naruto, who sat there in shock and, much to her chagrin, didn't give her a hug back until a few awkward seconds had gone by. For some reason, Naruto felt sad when he saw how upset she was, so he put his head closer to her ear. Forgive me Hinata-chan, I did not mean to cause you distress, but you must understand, my upbringing was far from conventional, and as such I did not learn basic human emotions for quite some time. My childhood was ruled by fear, the fear or loneliness and the fear of pain, both of which were unfortunately prevalent in my life. It will take me some time to feel comfortable around you, but I promise I will soon. Just please be persistent and don't give up on me. With a slight smile on his face, Naruto caressed Hinata's hair as he felt her nod into his neck. For several minutes, they remained in this position before Naruto withdrew. I would like to stay this way all afternoon, but unfortunately I have to meet with the Hokage and explain my current situation. Should I stop by the Hyuga complex later? She gave a nod. I'd like that. The understatement of the century would be to say that the Hokage was having a rough day in the first place. He was receiving criticism from AIM, more especially Hanzo, for the obvious killing of his shinobi during the Chunin tests. Since Hanzo and Hiruzen signed a waiver expressly for that reason, they were both aware that they had no control over the situation. No, Hanzo simply loved to trouble Hiruzen whenever he could. Furthermore, the shinobi themselves were growing restless, and Suna and Otto were both angry about the exam postponement. Hiruzen was aware that he would have to take the tests after stalling them all for no more than 2 days. Hiruzen knew how devastated Naruto would be if he were disqualified for being in a hospital bed, so he merely hoped Naruto would wake up by then. Then came Hiruzen's greatest issue, Orochimaru, his traitorous pupil. 4 days had passed since Orochimaru's horrible experiment was uncovered and Naruto was saved, but they were still no closer to learning what he had done to the boy or why. Hearing how Orochimaru had carefully peeled back Naruto's epidermis while making a clean incision down his thoracic region, likely with a smirk on his face, disgusted Hiruzen. Hiruzen felt enraged. Orochimaru's final deed was merely the cherry on top of his anger at everything he had done over the years. He knew it was a mistake to even inform the council that Orochimaru had experimented on Naruto's seal, and he was furious at them for demanding that Naruto be put to death in order to stop the Kyuubi from being released. Finally, he was upset with himself for letting it all happen. He had the opportunity to stop Orochimaru years ago, to permanently abolish the council when he returned to his role as Hokage, and to do a great deal more for Naruto than he had already done. All Hiruzen could hope for was that when he was awake, he would be able to ask Naruto for forgiveness, since it was better late than never. He was adamant about changing. He was certain that Naruto would be thrilled to learn a new jutsu, so perhaps he could offer him private tutoring lessons. After that, he could treat Naruto to some of his favorite foods. In embarrassment, Hiruzen hung his head. I'm doing nothing more than bribing a young boy for failing to do something that I should have been doing for years. I truly am not fit for the position of Hokage. He heard a commotion outside his office and got up to go see Naruto. He could tell that his secretary was attempting to prevent someone from entering his room by pretending that he was out to lunch, even though they both knew that was untrue. Then it dawned on him, she only says that lie to one person. Enter. A loud humph was heard as Naruto, still wearing his hospital gowns, entered his office through the open doors. Naruto's expression was frowning. "Hokage-sama, I suggest that you teach your assistants that they hold no authority over shinobi." His honorific name made Hiruzen frown. "Hello Naruto, how are you feeling? Can I get you anything?" Naruto grinned. "I'm doing well Hokage-sama, thank you for asking. As for what you can give me, how about some new clothes? I just don't think these skimpy gowns do me justice." Hiruzen gave a nod. "Of course Naruto, I will have clothes brought for you rat." An anbu was lowered from the ceiling while kneeling. "Hi Hokage-sama? Grabbed young Naruto here something to wear other than the rags that the hospital deemed fit to give him." "Hi Hokage-sama." Hiruzen walked around his desk and gave Naruto a grandfatherly hug as the anbu vanished in a whirl of leaves. "I'm sorry Naruto. I'm so sorry. I should have been there by your side for you all those years against the council. And I should have stopped Orochimaru so none of this should have happened to you. I'm so sorry, I've failed you Naruto." Hiruzen was shocked when Naruto laughed and gave him a hug in return. "Nonsense GG, none of this is your fault. We are only human and we all make mistakes, and I've forgiven yours many years ago. You did what you could and I could ask no more than that. Sure, there have been bad times, and I've had a hard life, but I never blamed you or anyone else. In fact, I think I'm a stronger person because of it, so in a way I'm grateful." Hiruzen was pleased that Naruto had once again recognized him as his surrogate grandfather, despite his disbelief at Naruto's maturity. Hiruzen got back up after a few minutes and dabbed at a few dripping tears. "Thank you Naruto. You have no idea how much that means to me." While Naruto positioned himself in one of the room's numerous chairs, he returned to his desk and sat down, grinning. There was a pause before Naruto sighed. "So GG, I take it you want me to explain exactly what happened, am I correct?" Hiruzen laughed. "That would be nice, yes." Naruto gave a nod. "Tell me GG, what do you know of the Rakudo Sennin?" It goes without saying that Naruto's explanation of the truth behind one of the most significant myths in shinobi history was an incredible tale that lasted for the next hour. Hiruzen felt both joy that Naruto had at last the strength to realize his dream and resentment at what had been imposed on him. Naruto showed no signs of wanting to misuse his new abilities during the explanation, which said a lot about his personality. Hiruzen sighed deeply as he reclined in his chair after Naruto was done. "Wow. Just, wow. Hey Naruto." "Hi?" Hiruzen leaned his desk forward. "Well, it's not that I don't believe you, but, well." Naruto grinned. "You want to see my eyes, right?" Hiruzen gave a nod. "It's just that I've always heard these stories as a boy, and to think that I can actually see the legendary dojutsu of the Rakudo Sennin is like a dream come true." Naruto laughed. "No problem GG. I would be concerned if you didn't ask to see them. In fact, I'm surprised you haven't sent me to Ibiki or Inoichi for a sanity check." Hiruzen chuckled. "I can if you still want me to, but I think you have had enough excitement for a little while." In a dismissive gesture, Naruto raised his hand. "I think I'll have to pass. Thank you anyway, here we go." Hiruzen observed as Naruto's pupil widened, creating concentric rings across his eye, and his once blue eyes turned a deep purple. Then, on the ring nearest his pupil, 3 tiny tomo emerged, a divine power as gentle as it was vast emanated from his eyes. In terms of intimidation, it differed greatly from the Byakugan and the Sharingan, but it was strikingly similar. For a few seconds, Sarutobi just stared in wonder before Naruto's eyes returned to normal. "Well Naruto, I have seen few things in my life that have left me astounded, and that is most certainly one of them. What now? What do you want to do with this power? From what you told me you were tasked with bringing peace to the world. Good luck with that by the way." Naruto gave a snort. "Thanks for the vote of confidence GG. Anyway, what I would like to do is resign from Konoha's shinobi forces and travel the world uninhibited, though I doubt that will actually work." Hiruzen sighed heavily and started massaging his temples. "Yes, the council would never let you resign from our shinobi force. It's ironic really, since the majority of them were against you becoming a shinobi at all, but I'm sure as soon as you say you don't want to be a shinobi anymore they will fight against it with everything they have." Naruto let out a sigh. "Yes, I have come to grips with that outcome and have come to only one conclusion. You must promote me to a rank similar to that of the Sannin and allow me to leave the village with special privileges like Senju Tsunade and Jiraiya." Hiruzen laughed. "Ho, I'm surprised you know about those two. From what I heard, history was your worst subject at the academy." Naruto smiled. "What can I say? When your mind is merged with the creator of this world you tend to learn a thing or two." Hiruzen turned pale to death. "Wait, does that mean you?" Naruto gazed at the ground. "Yes GG, I know who my parents were." Hiruzen started to say something, but Naruto interrupted him. "Don't worry, I understand why you didn't say anything. If word of my lineage got out across the elemental nations, then I would have been in danger, especially from anyone who would want retribution for my father's actions. You had to choose between some piece of trivial information given to a child and the safety of thousands of people. As a Hokage, you made the correct choice. No matter if I agree with it or not, your duty to this village is stronger than your responsibility to me, and like I said, I forgave your mistakes long ago. Hiruzen wiped his eyes of the tears. Naruto, your sense of compassion and forgiveness is exactly what is needed to bring peace to these war-torn nations. From this day forward, myself and all those loyal to me will do everything we can to help you with your mission. For the first time in his life, Naruto was genuinely happy. Thanks, GG. You really have no idea how happy that made me. The elderly Hokage sighed and nodded. Okay, so now the problem is getting you to a position so you will be free to move around the elemental nations. I don't think I need to tell you that the council won't exactly let this slide, do I? Naruto gave a headshake. No, you don't. I do have a plan though, but for that to work I need to be a Chunin, so you need to put me in the Chunin exams again. Hiruzen laughed. The Rakudo Sennin Reborn is taking the Chunin exams? Well, I can't exactly say that is fair now, can I? Naruto choked back a laugh. No, I guess it isn't, but then again, the life of a shinobi is never a fair one. Anyway, as long as I at least make it to the finals, you have the authority to promote me, regardless of what anyone else says. After that, it is up explicitly to the Hokage on whom he or she promotes to a Junin. Unless the Junin hopeful completes the Junin test, that would be the easier path and would silence anyone who could oppose my promotion. But unfortunately we simply don't have the time. Once I am a Junin, I am able to be put on a temporary leave of absence from the shinobi forces, much like Tsunade and Jiraiya has, and after that I would only have to check back into the village every now and then. Leaning back in his chair, Hiruzen gazed at the ceiling. Well, Naruto, I'm impressed. I didn't think you would be able to concoct such an elaborate plan such as this as quickly as you did. Naruto gestured toward his own head, merged with a deity, remember? Hiruzen made a, oh, expression. I see. Well, I suppose I could come up with an excuse that Orochimaru caused the delay by trying to infiltrate during the exams. It isn't a complete lie. Very well, we will hold the preliminary matches in a few days, and a month after that we will hold the finals. Naruto grinned. Thanks, GG. I'll give everyone a show they won't believe. I'll make it so the council won't have any reason to doubt my promotion. Naruto rose from his seat. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to go to the Hyuga compound. Hiruzen tilted his head sideways. Hyuga compound? May I ask what for? His head was scratched by Naruto. Well, it would seem that I was not as observant as I should have been. Naruto observed the elderly man leaping from his seat and bouncing up and down with delight. What on earth are you doing, GG? With the biggest smile on his face, Hiruzen turned to face Naruto. I take it that you finally noticed the young heiress of the Hyuga clan, right? The blonde gave a head nod. Well, yes, but I don't know if I feel the same way about her yet. Where is this going? Hiruzen dismissively waved his hand. Where you like her or not is not important. Naruto's eyebrows arched. Beg your pardon? Hiruzen laughed. You see, there has been a little bet going on over the past few years. Once word got out that the young Hinata had a crush on you, several Junin got together and created a wager on when you would finally notice. This eventually spread throughout the village, and eventually everyone over the rank of Chunin got in on it, renewing the pot every year. Everyone who wanted to be part of the pot had to put in 1,000 ryo each year, and they were able to choose time frames on when they thought you would find out. Luckily for me, there were only 3 others besides myself who chose the time frame of the Chunin exams. Tell me, Naruto, what would you do with 10 million ryo? Naruto let out a sigh. I'm glad that the village has taken pleasure in placing wagers on my personal life. Now excuse me, I must go shower and get a decent meal in my system. The Anbu from earlier reappeared in Hiruzen's office with Naruto's new attire just as Naruto was ready to depart. I hope this works, Hokage-sama. These were the only clothes that were left in the spare outfits box. Naruto smiled at the prospect of his new appearance. They're perfect. That evening, Hinata was searching her closet for something to wear to Naruto. Even though he hadn't explicitly stated that it was a date, Hinata didn't care because, after 5 long years, it was close enough for someone in her position. She wanted something form-fitting but not overly revealing. She didn't want her father to criticize her for not maintaining the Hyuga image in public. Unfortunately for her, Hiyashi happened to be curious about why his daughter was taking all of her clothes out of her closet when he passed her room on his way to his study. When he realized exactly what was happening, his eyes widened. Damn it. This cannot be taking place at this moment. Now, of all times, she decides to show interest in dating. With a sigh, he entered her room. So who is it? Hinata froze, then sprang to her feet to confront her father. Toussaint? I don't you understand the Q question? Hiyashi's eyes narrowed. Don't lie to me, the only time girls your age rummage through their clothes is when they are trying to find something to impress a boy. You are more than aware that whomever you associate with reflects upon the Hyuga clan as a whole. So all is again, who is it? In defeat, Hinata hung her head. It's you, Uzumaki Naruto. Hinata failed to notice her father's eyes enlarge. No. Hiyashi decided that would be enough and started to leave his oldest daughter's room. No to-san. Hiyashi turned around, frozen. Excuse me? Hinata clenched her fists and mustered all her strength. IW will meet with Naruto tonight, W, whether you like it or not. Hiyashi's smile was one of amusement. Oh really? Hinata remained resolute. Yes. Hiyashi grinned broadly. Well, it would seem that this boy is all it takes for you to show some backbone. Interesting. I will meet with this boy, and if I deem him fit you may proceed with your plans. This was not one of the reactions Hinata had anticipated. Arigato? Whispering to himself, Hiyashi left her room. So much like her mother. I can only pray she has as much spirit as Hitomi did. After watching her father leave her room, Hinata merely blinked. She then waited for him to return and inform her that everything had been a cruel joke. For several more minutes while she continued to stare at the door she was equally perplexed, but fortunately he did not. It took her almost an additional half-hour to find something appropriate to wear. After she had calmed down again, a knock on her door interrupted her as she was finishing up. Enter. Ko, a member of the branch family, bowed and opened the door. Hinata-sama, there is an Uzumaki Naruto here for you. Hinata's face broke into a smile. Thank you Ko P, please tell him I'll be there shortly. Ko bowed. I shall inform them of your arrival. Hinata became anxious. Them? Ko gave a nod. Indeed, your father is currently meeting with him. With wide eyes, Hinata rushed past Ko and out of the room. Hiyashi was scowling at the blonde while Naruto sat with him in the reception area. So, Naruto is it? Naruto gave a head nod. Indeed, Uzumaki Naruto, Hiyashi-sama. Hiyashi's eyebrows arched. Is that so? Well, that is a very curious choice of clothing. May I ask what inspired it? Naruto grinned. I am very proud of my Uzumaki heritage, and as such I wear the Uzumaki swirl of Uzushogakure proudly. Hiyashi blinked. So, you are aware of your ancestral home? Naruto laughed. Yes. I guess you could say that I have been informed of my heritage very recently, and I look forward to exploring my roots in the future. Hiyashi decided to gather information because he was obsessed with the word heritage. Naruto-san, has anyone told you that you bear an uncanny resemblance to the Yondaime Hokage? Naruto's gaze expanded. So, does he know? Well, two can play mind tricks? Naruto calmed down. It may have been mentioned once or twice, but surely I cannot be related in any way. If I was, then there would be no way I would have had to face the hardships I have had to deal with in my short life. Hiyashi grinned. You know, it is unwise to linger on the past, instead you should forge a better future. Naruto smiled. Oh, you misunderstand Hiyashi-sama. I am proud of what I have overcome. Every beating, every glare, every biased remark, they all shaped me into the man I am today. Hiyashi gazed at the young man. And exactly what kind of man are you? Naruto grinned. A far greater man than this village has ever produced before. Hinata rushed into the room, her eyes wide, before Hiyashi could reply. She briefly glanced between Naruto and Hiyashi, fearing that they would be at each other's throats, but her suspicions were unjustified. When she saw what Naruto was wearing, her face flushed. His bright orange Kill Me Now jumpsuit had been replaced by ordinary black shinobi pants and black sandals. His strangely toned arms were emphasized by the ripped sleeves of a white overcoat he wore over a plain white shirt. She would have seen 9 black tomos with the Uzumaki swirl below if he had turned around. She bowed low, reverting to her shy old self when she realized they were both staring at her. Jigomen to-san. Naruto-kun, I hope I wasn't interrupting anything important? Naruto gave a headshake. Naruto stood up and bowed to Hiyashi, saying, of course not, Hinata-chan. In fact, we were just finishing up. Forgive me, Hiyashi-sama, but all will be revealed during the Chunin exams. He extended an arm and turned to Hinata. Shall we? After glancing once between Hiyashi and Naruto, Hinata accepted the offer with a smile. After giving her hand a comforting squeeze, Naruto turned to face Hiyashi. I shall return her before it grows too late and shall assure that we uphold the standards someone of her position requires. Hiyashi was taken aback for the first time in a long time. I expect nothing less, Uzumaki-san. After bowing, Naruto and Hinata left through the front door, with Hiyashi observing them the entire time. Hiyashi exhaled deeply. You are full of surprises, Naruto. Your father would be proud. He sighed as soon as Naruto and Hinata left through the front door. Wow, that was much more stressful than I thought it would be. After years of wanting to do so, Hinata molded herself into his side while giggling. He's just very stern. I can tell that deep down he really does care about myself, and Hanabi Hij just doesn't show it very often. But no matter what, I don't think he wants to see his daughters grow you up. Naruto glanced down at the girl curled up against him. I can't really say that I don't enjoy the contact, he said, carefully releasing his arm from Hinata's hold. She instantly looked at the ground, believing she had done something incorrectly. No, I've already blown my chance. It's unbelievable that I actually believed I could win his approval. Her tirade was cut short when she felt Naruto's arm encircle her shoulder and draw her in. Naruto laughed as he glanced down at the girl's face. There's no need to be so nervous, Hinata-chan. I told you that I would try to discover any feelings towards you. And I believe being physically close like this is a way to do that. Hinata took pleasure in the warmth emanating from him as she slowly nodded her head. Don't let this be a dream, please. A boy their own age came across them as they were ready to leave the compound's gates and nearly knocked them both down to prevent a collision with the boy. Naruto swiftly grabbed Hinata by the waist and spun her around his back in a dance move. Naruto turned to the Hyuga boy he knew as Neji from his earlier encounter during the first part of the Chunin exam. Once Hinata was safely on the ground, albeit frantically flushed. Is there an issue you have with us, or do you just delight in interrupting good moments? The boy gave Naruto a narrowed look. Naruto smiled and nearly apologized for his impolite behavior before the boy resumed his conversation. I have no issue with the two of you being together. In fact, it's almost like you were made for each other. Yes, failures such as yourselves should stick together, that way no one else has to deal with losers such as you two. Naruto was about to react after giving the boy a fierce look when he felt a gentle hand resting on his shoulder. When Naruto turned around, he saw Hinata silently pleading with him not to press the issue while she stared at the ground. Taking Hinata's hand, Naruto swept past the boy, almost toppling him. The boy gave them a scowl. Run along, failure, and Hinata-sama, try not to embarrass the clan too much. Even though Naruto was furious and wanted nothing more than to humiliate the Hyuga, he controlled his temper for the benefit of his friend. A look of fear crossed their faces as they were ready to pass the guards at the front gate, and they fell to their knees. Hinata-sama, Naruto-sama, please enjoy your evening. With a bewildered Hinata following him, Naruto laughed and continued to leave the compound. Naruto-kun, why were those guards so afraid of you? Naruto grinned. Well, when I tried to get access to the Hyuga complex, they were most adamant about not admitting me. They were unfortunately introduced to Inten Yin release, the origin of all genjutsu. Before Hinata could respond, she was dragged into Naruto's arms and witnessed the three tomo that developed in Naruto's eyes. Kamui. Hinata closed her eyes and pressed her head against Naruto's shoulder after sensing a tug on her person. You can open your eyes, Hinata-chan. She opened her eyes slowly and saw that they were clearly on the opposite side of Konoha, on top of the Yondaime Hokage's head. Uncertain of what to ask, she gazed at Naruto with wide eyes. Naruto-kun. He laughed. I will explain everything after dinner. Naruto bit his thumb after bringing it to his mouth. He slammed his hands on the floor and did a series of hand seals. Gyaku Kachiyose no Jutsu, reverse summoning. A picnic basket and a big blanket materialized in a cloud of smoke after kicking off his sandals at the end. Naruto stepped onto the blanket and walked toward the basket. He glanced up at Hinata, who was still motionless, as he began removing the food items. Would you like to join me? I know I have quite the reputation of having a bottomless pit of a stomach, but I don't believe I can eat all this food all alone. Hinata blinked, bringing herself back to the present. Gomen. She sat down beside Naruto after removing her shinobi sandals. She believed that everything was a dream and that she would wake up at any moment. She couldn't possibly be dating the boy she had been stalking and watching for the previous 4 years. She was, apparently, and happier than ever. The meal itself was flawless. It included all of Hinata's favorite dishes and was freshly prepared. He knew she enjoyed peanut butter and fried cucumber sandwiches, but she still didn't know how. She was certain there would be some dango, Japanese dumplings that resemble mochi and are served on sticks of 3 or 4, or sakura mochi, sweet pink mochi, rice cake, filled with red bean paste and topped with a cherry blossom leaf, sakura. For dessert, to her delight, however, he brought out piping hot cinnamon rolls with a sugar glaze on top, which were regarded as a delicacy in Konoha at this time of year. The two discussed a wide range of topics, from stories about the various missions they had completed with their team to contrasting stories from the academy, or, in Hinata's case, the absence of them. Though Hinata found it hard to believe, Naruto's story of battling one of the Kiri no Shinobi Katana Shichinen Shu, 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, and rescuing a whole nation from a tyrannical business magnate seemed like something Naruto would do even though she didn't have any fascinating tales like his. Naruto listened carefully, giggling at her antics and praising her accomplishments. With Hinata resting her head on Naruto's shoulder and Naruto's arm draped over her shoulder, they eventually finished their meal and started to watch the sun set over the horizon from one of Konoha's best vantage points. Naruto produced a small lamp and placed it in front of them after the sun had set. "So Hinata-chan," she nestled deeper into his neck's crook. "What is it, Naruto-kun?" He inhaled deeply. "Well, I want to explain what happened to me." Hinata leaned up as her eyes popped open. "Why you don't have to if you don't want to." Naruto gave a headshake. "It'll come out during the Chunin exams anyway, so there really isn't any point to be secretive with it." He started out by describing the history of the Rakudo Sennin in general as well as all about the tailed beasts. Then he described the Jubi and how it was sealed inside the Rakudo Sennin, giving him abilities that had never been seen in the world before. He described how the Rakudo Sennin divided the Jubi into the 9 Biju that are known today. He took a moment to process the information. "The reason Orochimaru captured me is related to the Biju. In fact, it's the entire reason he targeted me." When Hinata recalled seeing Naruto on that table, she shuddered. Why would he do that to you? Naruto let out a sigh. "Because you were lied to, Hinata-chan. In fact, the entire population under the age of 15 has been lied to." Hinata gave a blink. What do you mean, Naruto-kun?" Naruto's gaze was fixed on the floor. "You see, we were all told that the Yondaime Hokage did battle with the Kyuubi on October 10th all those years ago, and he sacrificed his life to kill it. Most of that is true. He did sacrifice his life in battle against the Kyuubi, but he didn't kill it. It was instead sealed into his son, born less than an hour before, sealed into me." Hinata received a double shock because her crush was the son of the most adored Hokage in history in addition to possessing one of the most potent entities in existence. Closing his eyes, Naruto waited to hear her response, but instead he felt her embrace him tightly. "I'm so sorry, Naruto-kun. I'm so sorry I was never there for you. Why you must have been so lonely. I'm sore." Naruto chuckled. "Nonsense, Hinata, none of this is even remotely your fault. I have long since come to terms with my condition, and used the pain of loneliness to push myself and motivate me whenever I was down. Unfortunately, my tale is not finished. You see, Orochimaru somehow learned of the increased meiotic regeneration granted to me by housing the Kyuubi, and so he performed an experiment. He sought to reunite all the Biju in a single vessel, and he was successful." Leaning back, Hinata gazed at Naruto. "Yes, Hinata. I now house the Jubi, the creator of this world, and have been granted all of his powers for all intents and purposes. I am the second coming of the Rakudo Sennin, tasked with bringing peace to this war-torn world." Hinata fainted, reacting as anyone would if they discovered their love was essentially the reincarnation of God. With a laugh, Naruto started packing the basket while Hinata rested. He watched her sleep for a few minutes before deciding to cover her to protect her from the chilly night air. Kamui, with Hinata wrapped in a blanket and trying to get as deep into Naruto's chest as she could, Naruto appeared in the center of the Hyuga compound. Hiyashi was waiting for Naruto when he approached the main building and opened the door to enter the reception area. Hiyashi's eyebrows arched. "Pleasant night." Naruto gave a nod. "Very pleasant, thank you, Hiyashi-sama." With a nod, Hiyashi gestured for Naruto to place his daughter on a couch before he departed the room. After Naruto carefully placed her on the couch, Hinata started to complain in her sleep. As soon as the comforting warmth left her, her eyes popped open, revealing Naruto's face. "I knew it was all a dream." Naruto laughed. "No, Hinata-chan, you simply fainted when I finished my explanation." Hinata's gaze expanded. Naruto-kun. "Gomen. I didn't mean to, it's just that, well." One of her bangs was brushed away from her face by Naruto. "Don't worry about it, I actually thought you took it rather well considering everything that happened. Now, I must take my leave. Unfortunately, I would love to spend more time with you before the Chunin finals, but unfortunately I must train myself to gain access to the full range of my power. I will see you at the conclusion of the exams, Hinata-chan." She raised her head to meet his lips as he leaned down to kiss her forehead. He was about to pull away, but Hinata was able to get her hands out of the blanket and put them around his neck. He remained there for a few seconds, savoring the moment. When they saw someone behind them clearing their throat, they broke up. When Naruto leapt back, he saw Hiyashi staring at him with daggers in a very angry manner. "I believe you have said good night quite well enough. It is late and Hinata must get a full night's sleep for her training tomorrow." Naruto bowed. He turned to Hinata, who was attempting to extricate herself from the cocoon of the blanket, and said, "Of course, Hiyashi-sama. Good night, Hinata-chan." With a smile on his face and an odd sensation of warmth in the pit of his stomach, Naruto left the Hyuga compound. Frustrated, Hiruzen rubbed his temples. He occupied the place at the head of a large oval table. All of the shinobi clan leaders were seated to his right, the elected representatives who represented the non-shinobi members of Konoha on his left, and Hiruzen's cycloptic former teammate Danzo at the other end of the table. Before a particularly gregarious council member in charge of the food market quarter arrived, they had been sitting there in silence for almost 10 minutes. Hokage-sama. I believe everyone is present, why do we not start? Hiruzen gave a nod. Very well, I call this council meeting to order. We are tasked this evening with bringing the Chunin exams back on track. Due to some unforeseen circumstances involving Orochimaru, we were forced to postpone the next stage of the exams. Next to speak was Nara Shikaku. About that, Hokage-sama, I would like to report that our teams still have yet to determine Orochimaru's course of action, and we still don't know why he targeted him. Everyone in the village knew that Naruto's pink-haired teammate had helped Orochimaru capture him. The village's civilian population was not pleased to see their resident demon fleeing with a known traitor. A pink-haired councilwoman named Mebuki protested when the Jinchuriki was mentioned. Hokage-sama, surely you have the child in a well-protected area just in case he decides to turn against us. Surely it isn't coincidence that he is kidnapped by one of the biggest threats to this village and turns up not a day later. He is a menace to us all and must be dealt with. The council's civilian members started nodding their heads in agreement. Shikaku slammed his hand on the table before Hiruzen could reply, which is unusual for Nara, as he was taking deep breaths to calm himself. He yelled, "Shut the fuck up," and everyone's eyes widened. You could count on one hand how many times Shikaku has been this irate. All of you presume that Naruto went with that psychopath willingly. You all have no idea what Orochimaru did to him. My son was on the team who found him, and what he saw shook him up so much that he stayed in his room for 2 days and refused to come out. I had to have Inoichi help him so he didn't fall into a deep depression. The blonde in question cleared his throat. True, while the young Nara was the best of friends with Naruto, what he saw was enough to shake his entire belief in being a shinobi. He had to use my technique to see what he saw, and let me tell you, that night I didn't sleep for more than an hour. Truthfully, it's a miracle that Naruto hasn't been emotionally broken, and the fact that he is still able to function as a person speaks volumes about his perseverance. The same woman with the pink hair raised her head in outrage, while several council members looked down in embarrassment. Whatever happened to that boy has been deserved several times over from what my daughter has told me. Inoichi's eyebrows arched. Oh really? And exactly what has she told you? Mebuki laughed. What hasn't he done? He tried to sabotage their team from day one. He almost got the young Uchiha killed on their first mission outside the village walls. And now he has purposely impeded his team's progress during the Chunin exams. Inoichi laughed. Well, I guess that's just too bad. Mebuki gave the blonde a scowl. What? Shikaku understood what his friend was implying. What he is saying is that due to all of those issues being shinobi affairs, they will be dealt with by the Shinobi Council, not the civilian side, and I believe I speak for everyone on the Shinobi Council when I say that there will be no actions brought against Uzumaki-san at this time. As the civilian side steamed, the other members of the Shinobi Council nodded in agreement. Hiruzen let out a sigh. Listen, I didn't bring this meeting together for us to argue over Naruto. I am here to simply state that I have made the decision to have the last phase of the Chunin exams in a week from tomorrow. They will consist of tournament-style back-to-back fights where the matches are chosen at random. We will determine the winner of the Chunin exams that way, and everyone who managed to finish the second phase, with Team 7 included, will participate in the final phase. Any questions? Mebuki opened her mouth to speak, but Hiruzen interrupted, and yes, Uzumaki Naruto will be participating along with his team, unless of course you want to exclude your daughter and Sasuke too. Good, then this meeting is hereby adjourned, Mebuki said, shaking her head no. With the exception of Shikaku, who remained, everyone rose and departed. Hokage-sama, are you sure it's wise to let Naruto participate in the last round? Hiruzen gave a head nod. Yes, he must participate. There is no other way. You will see what I mean when the time comes. The entire village will bear witness to a new era. Shikaku raised an eyebrow in anticipation of a response. He sighed and got to his feet when one never arrived. Troublesome. Well, for Naruto's sake I hope you're right with this, Hokage-sama, I really do. Hiruzen remained seated at the desk and gazed down at it. Me too, Shikaku, me too. As the sun rose above the treetops, Naruto sat cross-legged on top of the Yondaime Hokage's head. Meditating, he was planning his strategic ascent to become the new Rikudo Sennin. While he was lost in thought, he would need to proceed cautiously because he was certain that if he did so too quickly, the council and the civilians would oppose him, which could cause his mission to be delayed by months, something he couldn't afford. When he opened his eyes, the sun's first rays were visible, absolutely stunning. It is hard to imagine such beauty exists in this broken world. With a sigh, Naruto rose from the ground. Guess I should meet with my team today. Naruto concentrated his chakra on his left eye while closing his right, Kami. At Training Ground 7, Naruto resurfaced after vanishing with a shimmer. It appeared that he had another 2 hours before anyone else would arrive, and he was aware that his team met here every morning. He approached the middle training pool after his gaze drifted to the other three as he recalled being tied there for attempting to surreptitiously consume the 3 lunches during the bell test. A smile appeared on his face. Taking a walk down memory lane, are we? Naruto's cycloptic Junin sensei appeared when he turned around. I guess you could call it that I will miss this place when I'm gone. Many fond memories here. Kakashi appeared to be thinking deeply. So Hokage-sama was serious. Kakashi walked over to his pupil, who fell to his knees a foot away from Naruto. Please Naruto, forgive me. The entire time I had been your sensei, I had made sure to keep my distance from you. I failed you as a sensei by subconsciously holding back on your training, and because of that you were captured and tortured. I abandoned you, a comrade and a student, and because of that I am lower than the maggots on a rotting carcass. Astonished, Naruto blinked. He was surprised that the arrogant former Anbu captain would so readily confess his shortcomings. Naruto burst out laughing. Apology accepted. Kakashi saw amusement in Naruto's eyes as he looked up in shock. I'll admit I am not pleased with your confession, but at least you had the guts to admit you were wrong and sought forgiveness also. Do not think that you were the reason Orochimaru captured me. He is one of the best shinobi Konoha has ever produced, so there was no way I stood a chance as a genin, no matter if you trained me to your fullest potential or not. After wiping a tear from his eye, the silver-haired man got to his feet. Naruto, there are no words to describe how thankful I am that I had the honor to teach one of the most compassionate and forgiving people in all the elemental nations. After a few moments of staring, the blonde young man burst out laughing. Nonsense Kakashi. I am not the saint you or Hokage-sama makes me out to be. I simply see the facts and keep an open mind. To change the world does not come about by monumental deeds and revolutionary ideas. It comes from everyday confrontations and the willingness of the people to change. I believe the day will come when people can truly understand each other, but for that to happen I must shoulder the burden of people's hatred and grudges, even those directed towards me. Kakashi gave nod. Eloquently spoken Naruto, and for what it's worth, I believe that if anyone can find such a future, it's you now. If there is anything I can do to help you, please, don't hesitate to let me know. Naruto grinned as he rubbed his chin in contemplation. Well, now that you mention it, my taijutsu is still pretty horrible. The man with only one eye grinned. Sasuke's day was going strangely well first. Even though his team was disbanded and failed to complete the second test phase, he was assured a place in the Chunin finals the following week. He believed he would have to learn how to use his newly unlocked Sharingan on his own, but he was also promised special lessons with Kakashi. Additionally, he was thrilled to learn that his blonde teammate had been released from the hospital. He was one of his few friends, almost like a surrogate brother. Even though he occasionally butted heads with the Dobi, he nearly lost it when he saw that he had been abducted. It was like that night all over again, but he knew he had to face the pain and inform the Hokage about the kidnapping. He was shocked that his pink-haired teammate could keep up with him after pushing himself to the limit to get to the tower that day. Perhaps she simply needed the right encouragement. Naruto's return to Team 7 for a few days of team training prior to the final portion of the Chunin exam was the icing on the cake for his figurative ice cream sundae. He woke up early for his daily training sessions, and after taking a shower and letting his body adjust, he left to meet his teammates. He hoped that one day his sensei would finally arrive on time, even though he knew he could probably wait another hour or two. He heard the clear sound of sparring as he entered the space where his team would be meeting. Inquisitive, he concealed himself behind a tree and peered out to see who it might be. Dobi would always be up at the crack of dawn pushing himself to the limit, so he wasn't shocked to see Naruto there. However, Sasuke was taken aback to see Kakashi there as well. The infamously late Kakashi was actually on time. No, he was early. The Uchiha were shocked. Sasuke raised his hands in a chakra flare. Kai. Not a genjutsu. Sasuke blinked. The two were now aware that Sasuke was present, and this was truly happening. After stopping their sparring, Naruto and Kakashi focused on the tree after sensing a chakra flare. Naruto smiled. He knew he couldn't tell Sasuke everything just yet, but he was excited to see how he would respond to his changes. You can come on out, Sasuke. You are more than welcome to join us. In fact, I think Kakashi might be thankful. He looks like he's getting very tired. The blonde turned to face his panting sparring partner. Not everyone has limitless energy, Naruto. It isn't very fair to compare me to a stamina beast like yourself. With a sly smile, Sasuke left the tree. I think you're getting rusty, Kakashi-sensei. If the Dobi is able to push you to your limits, I guess you should start doing some physical conditioning that the weird spandex-wearing guy keeps pestering you about. Speaking of weird clothes, what's with the get-up, Naruto? Naruto laughed as Kakashi went pale. True, I pushed him to his limits, but it isn't because he is out of physical condition. As to my change in wardrobe, well, I felt that orange and blue weren't the best colors for a ninja, and so I procured a new outfit. HN, was Sasuke's response. Well, enough small talk for now. Since you are here, how about a spar while we wait for the last member of our team? That is, if you think you are healed enough to receive a beatdown? After laughing and removing his outer jacket, Naruto assumed a stance in which his right hand extended up and over his head, his left arm bent across his chest, and his knees bent. Sasuke's eyebrows arched. What kind of stance is that? Sasuke assumed his own stance after Naruto failed to respond. The two gazed at one another, waiting for the other to initiate contact. Sasuke was the first to charge, cutting Naruto's distance in a split second and hurling a right hook in his face. Neither Kakashi nor Sasuke could explain what transpired next. Grabbing Sasuke's fist, Naruto struck Sasuke's elbow with his hand using his momentum. Naruto threw Sasuke into the air, turning his fist so that he was facing away from him and upside down. Then, aiming an open-palmed blow at Sasuke's back square, Naruto made contact and made Sasuke's back arch. When the blow struck, Sasuke's lungs were forced to release air, causing him to skid across the ground and stop a few meters away from Naruto's position. Still standing where he had thrown Sasuke, the blonde took a deep, soothing breath. He approached his teammate, lowering his arms to his sides. He glanced at Kakashi, who continued to gaze at the blonde with wide eyes despite the Uchiha's protests that he should be left alone. Naruto moved to his side and assisted him in standing up. It seems that the blow hurt his pride more than his body. What the hell was that? Naruto gave his teammate a blink. What do you mean? The blonde was glared at by the Uchiha. Don't give me that shit. I want to know how you were able to throw me around like a rag doll. Making a oh face, Naruto enraged Sasuke, who was already furious. Well, you see, I grabbed your arm when you threw the punch and knocked you off balance too. That isn't what I meant. I want to know how you knew to do that. That isn't any taijutsu style I've ever seen, and that move was way too fluid for someone like you to pull off. Naruto recoiled, and he was breathing deeply to control his feelings. Careful, Sasuke, don't presume to know anything about me. You are nothing more than a teammate, and I hold no obligations to you outside those parameters. Tell me, when was the last time you even cared to talk to me about my life? Do you know my favorite color, my favorite hobby, my birthday even? I doubt you know any one of those, because you simply don't care. You have been self-centered the entire time I've known you, and the one thing you've done right by me was jumping in front of a barrage of senbon for me back in Wave, but then that might have been some way to hold yourself over me. I don't owe you anything, so you have no right to make demands of me. Without taking another look over his shoulder, Naruto picked up his jacket from the floor and left the training area. Sasuke recognized his error right away. He had been so consumed by his overwhelming defeat that he had succeeded in driving away one of the few people who genuinely cared about him. He felt a hand on his shoulder just as he was about to rush after the blonde to apologize. His sensei was shaking his head when he turned to look back. Let him go, Sasuke. He just needs some time to cool down. He is still recovering mentally, and it might take some time for him to really come back. Sasuke's gaze was fixed on the floor. I'm just so angry. I'm angry with Naruto for beating me so easily. I'm angry with the village for everything they did to Naruto over the years. I'm angry at Orochimaru for doing those terrible things to him. But most of all, I'm angry at myself for not being able to do anything to help him. I'm weak, Kakashi. I'm a pathetic excuse for a shinobi if I couldn't even protect my only friend. Sasuke's cheek was wet with tears. Then do something about it. Startled, Sasuke glanced up at his sensei. Train yourself. Push yourself to your limits and beyond. Throw aside your doubts and anger and just focus on bettering yourself so something like that never happens again. After a moment of intense contemplation, the Uchiha's eyes suddenly opened with a resolute fire blazing within. Thank you, Kakashi. Can you help me? Can you train me to protect my friends? Kakashi's Sharingan eyes showed through his headband. Let's get started. Despite his best efforts to control his emotions, Naruto was upset. His only desire was to beat the Uchiha to death. But he had to leave since he knew it would likely result in the boys' death. Since they were young students in the academy, he has endured humiliation after humiliation with Sasuke. He had spent his entire life trying to outdo Sasuke and gain his respect as an equal, but now that he had accomplished his objective, Sasuke simply became enraged and snubbed him. He had wandered into Training Ground 8, where Team 8 was getting ready for the tests, because he was so engrossed in his thoughts. Because Hinata had her Byakugan activated, she was the first to notice Naruto as a result of her brief distraction. Kiba hit her. sending her skidding along the ground directly in Naruto's direction. Out of his peripheral vision, Naruto saw something skidding towards him. He blinked, and he watched in shock as Hinata stood up and brushed the dirt from her clothing for a few seconds. The blonde gazed at her, then at her team, who were all staring back at him. With a laugh, Naruto turned to face the group. "Forgive the intrusion, I was too caught up in my thoughts and it seems that I interrupted your training. I will be taking my leave now." He felt arms snatch him from behind and lock over his font as he turned to leave. "It's okay Naru-kun, we were just finishing up anyway, why you aren't I interrupting anything?" With a laugh, Naruto spun around in the girl's embrace. "I don't know Hinata-chan, your team seems to be upset with my presence here." Kurenai took a step forward. "Nonsense Naruto, Hinata is correct, we were just finishing up for the morning. It is time they all break apart for their individualized training programs. Can't have them spy on each other now, can we?" The woman with the red eyes looked at her two male pupils. "Run along you two, I believe your parents are expecting you for training in your clan techniques." The lads first glanced at their sensei, then at Hinata, then at the blonde, and finally at one another. Kiba let out a sigh. "Hey Shino, wanna go get some grub before we have to go for more training? I'm famished." With a shrug, Shino started to leave with the boy. "That's agreeable, I don't look forward to my father's training, he is surprisingly brutal." After observing the two disappear into the distance, Naruto turned to face the blue-haired girl who was closing her eyes and cuddling closer to his chest. "Well then I guess I came at an opportune moment, since I was heading to get some lunch, but I guess I should go to the hospital now." Kurenai's eyebrows arched. "Hospital? I never pegged you for one to enjoy that tasteless mush they called food there?" Naruto laughed. "Oh never, I wouldn't dare touch that dirt. I have to make an appointment for an operation. I seem to have grown a rather attractive woman from my abdomen, and she doesn't look like she will detach herself anytime soon." When Naruto's chest started to warm up, he could feel the heat emanating from Hinata's face. Even though she was silent, Kurenai merely grinned at Naruto's endearing joke. "I see you have my sympathy Naruto. I heard those growths are quite aggressive and tend to be quite costly, especially if that growth enjoys the sweet taste of cinnamon rolls." Hinata tried to make her eyes as big as she could as she raised her head to face Naruto. "Hey, are we going to get cinnamon rolls?" Naruto let out a gasp. "It speaks." With a pout, Hinata pulled away and crossed her arms over her chest. That isn't versus very nice Naru-kun." The Hyuga appeared to be annoyed when Kurenai and Naruto exchanged glances and giggled. What's so funny?" Stepping forward, Naruto gave Hinata a hug and kissed the top of her head. "Forgive me Hinata-chan, but your pouting was just too cute to take seriously. How about we go get you some of those cinnamon rolls, huh? Would you like to join us Kurenai-sensei?" Kurenai muttered something about weak-willed men, and shook her head. "No thanks Naruto. I appreciate the offer but I don't think Hinata would be pleased with me if I accepted. I was going to ask you about your intentions towards her, but it looks like you were a happy couple already, and she looks to be in good hands, so that is unnecessary." Hinata reddened. "Anyo, we, Naru-kun, we." Naruto laughed. He raised Hinata's head to meet his, saying, "What she is trying to say is that we haven't really talked about being a couple yet, but I would like to be, if that's okay with you." A dreamy expression appeared on Hinata's face, and her eyes half closed. "Really? Are you sure you want T2?" Naruto gave a nod. "Yes, I'm sure when I came here today I was in a rather foul mood, but when you hugged me all those feelings disappeared, and a warm feeling rose from deep inside me and it made me happy." Hinata put her arms around his neck and lowered his face to hers for a kiss because she didn't want to hear any more. When she sensed Naruto beginning to reciprocate, she grew more and more involved, but before it could go too far, they heard someone clear their throat, so they broke up. Kurenai had a wry smile on her face as they both tried their hardest to mimic a tomato. "Okay. Well, I'm going to leave before Hinata passes out on us. Make sure you don't do anything that would spread rumors, okay?" Naruto bowed. "Of course Kurenai-sensei." Kurenai laughed. "Actually, that was aimed more towards Hinata. Just make sure you bring her to the Hyuga compound in an hour. She has personal training with her father." With an arm raised in the air, she waved back at them as she turned around and left. After waiting for her to go, Naruto held out his hand to Hinata. "Well, I believe we have a lunch date to attend to, don't we?" Grinning, Hinata took his hand. "I guess we do, don't we?" The blonde noticed that he was not stuttering, but he kept his thoughts to himself. Naruto was standing in what appeared to be a barren area of land, several miles outside of Konoha. One of the few locations where he could train without the ANBU's prying eyes was here. He flashed through a series of hand seals after gathering chakra in his body. Mokuton. Shinran Tanjo, Wood Release, Forest Birth. Massive trees appeared all around the blonde, forming a forest out of nothing more than chakra around him. Life emerged from the abrasive earth. Naruto then sent multiple chakra orbs into the air after flashing through yet another set of hand seals. Sweden. Ida and Ako, water release, great rainfall. The sky was filled with heavy, dark clouds, and soon the whole area was covered in a torrential downpour. Naruto smiled as he gazed up at the sky and extended his hand to feel the raindrops. Jubi-sama, you said that I am tasked with keeping the peace of our world. Does that only pertain to humans? I would have had to reclaim my abilities if I hadn't sensed you simply constructing a new habitat for the wildlife. In response to your inquiry, no, you have a responsibility to all life on Earth, but since humans are the species that has the biggest impact on the planet, they also need your full attention. Naruto gave a nod. I see, and I also had another question. What will your influence do to my progeny? Will they inherit your power too? The Jubi's face was smirking, and Naruto could feel it. You already have plans to bed someone, not even a week after our merge? Naruto reddened. No, it isn't that. Maybe in the future, but not now. I just want to be prepared for whatever may happen. I've always wanted a large family, and it looks like Hinata-chan wants to have a family with me too, so I just want to be prepared. You truly have a lot of surprises in store. Your restraint is admirable, but most men would immediately succumb to their carnal desires when given the chance. Sincerely, I have no idea what will occur after you pass on your genes. The last time it occurred, one person received a dojutsu, and the other person developed a deep spiritual bond with nature. All I can say is that your kids will be unique and most likely grow up to be extremely powerful people. Thank you, Jubi-sama, for your wisdom. I will let you return to your slumber. As the rain kept coming down, Naruto sat down on a big rock and felt the Jubi's presence return to its dormant state. Naruto closed his eyes and visualized a warm summer day approaching a large house. A boy and a girl, who might have been twins, would attack him as soon as he opened the door. Then he would watch his oldest, ideally a boy, while he held and rocked his newborn as he fed it. When Naruto eventually entered and greeted his kids, his wife would come around the corner and give him a tender kiss. She would only be displaying the slight bump that signified yet another child being raised in her womb, so he would need to exercise caution. This would be Naruto's nighttime dream, in which he would drift off to sleep while imagining and praying to whatever god might be awakened. He had always wanted to receive and give that attention because he had been alone all of his life and had never experienced what it was like to be loved by family. He always desired a family, but since there was no one to claim him as such, he chose to create his own with a lovely and devoted wife. Naruto grew increasingly at ease with Hinata's portrayal as that woman. He knew from their brief encounter that she was a good person who would make a fantastic mother in the future. Although she was attractive, which was a bonus, Naruto actually cared more about her character than her looks. Even those who were considered unattractive were, as he personally witnessed, among the most beautiful on the inside. When Naruto opened his eyes, a violent rainstorm, one of his own inventions, greeted him with fresh fervor in his eyes. Naruto rose to his feet, clenched his fist, and proclaimed to the sky. When this world is free from the fear of war and conflict, I will achieve my dream. I will forge a future for myself and my family, or I will die trying. Together with all the other genin teams that had passed the exam's second phase and Team 7, which the council had selected, Naruto stood in the center of Konoha Stadium. The spectators were betting on who would advance to the next round and supporting their favorite Chunin hopeful. Naruto noticed that a lot of the genin hopefuls had ecstatic faces. Some even had smug looks. One blue-haired Hyuga, of course, appeared to be on the verge of fainting from anxiety. With composure, Naruto approached her and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. When the girl saw who it was, she calmed down despite flinching at the contact. Don't be so nervous, Hinata-chan. You only need to do your best. No one can ask any more than that. I know you will do great. Hinata nodded, grinning. Thank you, Naruto-kun. Can you wait here with me? As they waited, the blonde laughed and moved to her side to get everyone's attention. The Hokage screeched a huge fireball into the sky. A few minutes later, the Hokage cleared his throat and used a jutsu to be heard throughout the stadium. When the crowd finally fell silent, people of Konoha and elsewhere in the elemental nations, welcome to the 183rd Chunin exams. Before Hiruzen raised his hand to restore the quiet, there was another round of applause. Now, usually we have a preliminary match to reduce the number of participants, but due to an unprecedented emergency we were forced to skip right to the last round of the exams. Below you see all the Chunin hopefuls, and right here today we will hold tournament-style fights until there is only one tournament champion. An enormous chorus of applause and cheering erupted, and it seemed to get louder over time. When Naruto glanced at Hinata, he noticed that she was having the first signs of a panic attack. Short breaths and wide eyes, the girl looked up at Naruto and calmed down, if only slightly, when he took her hand in his and squeezed it. At this moment, a man wearing a senbon and a blue bandana around his head emerged onto the stadium floor and spoke loudly enough to be heard over the throng. "My name is Shiranui Genma, and I will be the proctor for this portion of the exams." The audience fell silent once more as the man spoke. "We will be holding individual battles where the participants have been chosen at random and will advance via bracket style. The contestants will fight and use any jutsu they possess, and the match will continue until one opponent forfeits, or is deemed unable to continue. Killing is frowned upon, but not grounds for disqualification. Now before we begin, is there anyone here who doesn't believe they will be able to participate?" For a few seconds, there was silence while the genin searched for anyone who might depart. A silver-haired boy with glasses slowly lifted his arm. "I, Yakushi Kabuto, would like to forfeit. My chakra reserves aren't nearly large enough to be able to last that long." The boy left the arena after Genma nodded and gestured to the exit. Genma turned back to the audience. "Would Uzumaki, Naruto and Akado Yoroi please stay down in the stadium while the rest of the genin please go to the observation balcony?" The genin started to move away, but before Naruto could reach the middle of the floor, his hand was pulled back, and he felt a gentle, wet touch on his cheek. It dawned on him abruptly that Hinata had just planted a kiss on his cheek. F for good luck. Grinning, Naruto let her go. He approached the proctor and confronted his opponent, who appeared to be considerably older than the typical genin's age. Genma glanced at both of them. "Okay. Put on a good show now. Large turnout today, Hajime." Yoroi and the proctor both leapt back, giving him space to plan his move. He scoffed as he turned to face Naruto, who was still standing there with his arms by his sides. "Are you so scared that you decided to just let me beat you to a pulp without putting up a fight? A good idea. Maybe you aren't as stupid as you look." Naruto let out a yawn. "Forgive me. I thought this was a fight, not a bickering match. I do hope that spewing insults isn't your jutsu, or this match will indeed be quite boring." With a growl, Yoroi lunged towards the blonde. Although Yoroi's hand was encircled by a blue aura, Naruto could already sense him accumulating chakra in his hands. Naruto stood motionless and allowed his opponent to approach, since he could sense the jutsu Yoroi was about to use before he even started. While laughing, Yoroi took hold of Naruto's head and started to drain his chakra. "You fool. I'm going to drain every last bit of chakra you have. You should have kept your distance while you could, but it's too late now." Across his chest, Naruto folded his arms. "Oh really? If you truly wish to drain me of my chakra, I hope you brought an army to do so, because I doubt you have the capacity to hold all of my chakra." The older man chuckled. "Don't think you can talk your way out of this one, boy. I've already won this." Yoroi suddenly collapsed to the ground, screaming in agony, and gripping his arm he screamed for assistance to stop the pain as he started to writhe in the dirt. With a laugh, Naruto reached down and touched his opponent's arm. Naruto started drawing his chakra back into his system as his hand glowed the same light blue as Yoroi's had earlier. After a few seconds of this process, Yoroi finally calmed down, stopped yelling bloody murder, and fell into blissful unconsciousness. Naruto shook his head and got back up. "I was going to warn you, but you were insistent on jumping into the battle without hearing my warning. My chakra is quite volatile, and only those of my blood are capable of housing it. Anyone else will be ripped apart by the chakra." A stunned audience watched as Naruto approached the stairs leading to the observation balcony. As a medical team hurried to Yoroi's side, Genma straightened out and continued walking. Winner by knockout, Uzumaki Naruto. Can Hyuga Neji and Uchiha Sasuke please come down to the stadium floor? Due more to the excitement of the second match than the outcome of the first, the crowd erupted in cheers and applause during his ascent of the stairs. Naruto went past Neji, who didn't even look at him as he descended. However, Sasuke was waiting for his blonde teammate at the top of the stairs. Sasuke placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder and spun him around when he attempted to pass him. "What do you want, Uchiha?" Sasuke gave the blonde a scowl. "Look, I'm sorry for the other day. I shouldn't have snapped like that, and I had no right to demand anything of you." Naruto's eyes narrowed. "You're right, you didn't." Sasuke let out a sigh. Sasuke extended his hand to Naruto and said, "Look, I'm trying to apologize here. I'm not used to doing this kind of thing. I just don't want to drive away my only friends?" Naruto glanced up at his teammate with the raven hair after glancing down at the extended appendage with a sigh. Naruto accepted the hand. "Friends, now go down there and win so I can kick your ass again." With a sly smile, Sasuke started to descend the stairs. "In your dreams, Dobi." After shaking his head, said Dobi approached his Hyuga girlfriend, who gave him a firm embrace as he approached. "Congratulations, Naruto-kun. That was amazing. Why, you didn't even do anything to him." At this point, Kiba approached holding Akamaru on his head and his hands in his jacket. "Yeah, what jutsu was that?" You just stood there and a few seconds later he was on the ground screaming. Was it a genjutsu? As he returned the embrace, Naruto laughed and gave Hinata a back rub. No, his defeat was of his own making. He attempted to steal my chakra, but he discovered the hard way that anyone not of my blood who tries to integrate my chakra into their system will be torn asunder by its power. Kiba gulped and his eyes widened. Yikes, remind me never to ask for your chakra in the future. After giving a nod, Naruto looked down at the stadium. Will do. Now let's pay attention to the fight below, it should be interesting. As she watched the battle below, Hinata pulled away and placed Naruto's arm around her shoulder. The match had only begun a few seconds before, and Neji and Sasuke were glaring at one another. Uchiha Sasuke, it will be great to prove the strength of the Hyuga clan against the last survivor. Sasuke grinned. Can it Hyuga? It doesn't matter what kind of jutsu you throw at me. I'll always win. I'm a Uchiha. We were stronger than the Hyuga before, and we will be stronger again. Activating his Byakugan, Neji dropped into his Juken stance. I don't know who this you keep talking about is, but I will prove that the Byakugan is the superior dojutsu. In an attempt to disable Sasuke's arms and stop his Tenketsu, Neji lunged forward and struck him twice in the shoulder just before Neji arrived and noticed the chakra gathered at the tips of his fingers. Sasuke ignited his Sharingan while lowering his right arm to the ground and using it as a pivot to attempt to kick Neji's abdomen. Sasuke leaned back at the waist to allow Neji's attack to pass harmlessly over him. Seeing the attack coming, Neji grabbed the foot, twisted it, and attempted to break the ankle of the Uchiha. Sasuke rotated his leg and pushed off with his right arm in the direction Neji was twisting his foot, making Neji's movement pointless as he kicked Neji in the face once more. The Hyuga had to leap back to escape the blow, but not before slamming two Tenketsu into Sasuke's grasping foot. As he watched Sasuke carefully place some weight on his foot and then wince in agony, Neji grinned. 2 down, 359 to go. Sasuke was more hesitant to allow Neji to come within striking range after he charged once more. Sasuke raised his right hand to his mouth while collecting chakra in his lungs. Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu, fire release, great fireball technique. It roared to life, sending a fireball several meters in diameter in the direction of the charging Hyuga. Sasuke was blinded by the smirk that escaped Neji's lips due to the fireball. Kaden. The Hyuga was swallowed by the fireball, but it broke apart as soon as it hit him, leaving behind a blue whirl of chakra. Sasuke's eyes widened as he witnessed the casual beating of one of his most valuable clan jutsu. Neji slowed to a halt as Sasuke noticed the chakra start to weaken. Neji charged again as soon as he regained his bearings, but Sasuke made sure to prepare this time. It will slow me down and only enable him to close more and more if I allow him to close any more of my Tenketsu. I must exercise caution. Sasuke and Neji exchanged blows, with Sasuke using his Sharingan to anticipate Neji's next move and knock his wrists away to stop any harm. Left. Correct shoulder arm leg. Now Sasuke kicked Neji in the stomach, sending him flying across the ground. People were yelling for more as the crowd cheered. When the Hyuga emerged from the dirt and wiped a drop of blood from his mouth, the Uchiha grinned. What's wrong, Neji? I thought you were going to prove which dojutsu was superior. Taking a few deep breaths, Neji frowned. Your arrogance will cost you dearly, Uchiha. Sasuke laughed. Hello Kettle, this is Pot. I'm black. Neji roared as he charged at Sasuke, who grinned and prepared to thwart the apparent assault. I was aware that the Hyuga's Juken is easily dismantled if you agitate them. All I have to do now is he grinning? Why would he? Shit. It's too late, Uchiha, you are within my range of deviation. As his nephew assumed the main house's signature stance, Hiyashi Hyuga, who was up in the stands, looked on in shock. Impossible. Looking up at her father was a young girl with long brown hair. To-san, what's wrong? Hiyashi gave a headshake. Without any guidance, Neji was able to recreate one of the strongest moves of the main family. Watch closely, Hanabi, for I have never seen a Hyuga as gifted with the Byakugan as Neji is. Neji was on Sasuke before he could leap back, blocking as many of these as I can is my only chance. Neji hit his legs with 2 blows. 2 palms. Those 2 were blocked by Sasuke. All right, I can still use my arms. Where will he hit next? Sasuke went to block Neji's lunges at his legs as well. However, Neji abruptly twisted his body upward and started attacking Sasuke's arms once more, and the Uchiha was unable to stop the transformation in time. 4 palms. Sasuke's arms went limp at his sides, and he winced in agony. Not good, not at all good. Before he causes any more harm, I must leave. As though he could read Sasuke's thoughts, Neji grinned in his head. I won't let you get away with it. 8 palms. Sasuke was cemented in place by Neji's blow to his legs, leaving the Uchiha vulnerable. 16 palms. Closing all tenketsu around Sasuke's lung, Neji continued his assault on his chest. Trash. You can't have any more of those fireballs. 32 palms. Sasuke grunted as a foreign chakra was pushed into his body, causing him to be struck like a rag doll and unable to move or even cry out in agony. 64 palms. Neji sent the Uchiha crashing across the floor and into the wall after striking Sasuke's chest with an open palm. Neji was breathing heavily from the effort, and Sasuke was lying on the ground still. This is the reality we live in. The Byakugan is, and always will be, superior to the Sharingan. The Sasuke in the dirt suddenly burst into a cloud of smoke. Nani? Neji was too exhausted to avoid the leg that was descending from above. Neji was sent straight down into the dirt by the attack, and the recoil caused him to bounce slightly off the ground panting. Sasuke leapt back into a stance after his kick landed. After coughing up blood, Neji attempted to stand again but fell back to the ground. As Genma moved forward, she realized the Hyuga could not endure much longer. Hyuga Neji is unable to continue. Uchiha Sasuke is the victor. Will Tsuchi-kin and Haruno Sakura please come down to the stadium floor? The Hyuga called out to Sasuke as a medical team arrived to pick up Neji. Wait, how did you escape? I was sure that I had you. Sasuke laughed. Kage Bunshin, I did a Kawarimi back when you were dispersing that Gokakyu. When you hang out with someone who can literally make hundreds of clones of himself, you are sure to pick up a thing or two. Though my limit is only 1 or 2, I can still do the trick. Neji let himself be placed on a stretcher and lowered his eyes. I see. I have failed the Hyuga as a branch member. Sasuke gave a headshake. Save the crap, Neji, it was a good fight and you know it. If the Dobi was down here he would be yelling his head off about not believing in that fate bullshit and living your own life, and for once, I would have to agree with him. Kin was leaving when Sasuke approached the stairs. She smiled sweetly at him, but he ignored it because he was too busy watching his teammate with the pink hair come down the stairs. Sakura, hold on a second. The girl's eyes were full of hearts. What is it, Sasuke-kun? With a deadly serious expression on his face, Sasuke placed a hand on her shoulder. Listen to me, I'm not going to tell you not to fight that girl, but be careful, she won't have any problems killing you. Hell, she might even do it just for a laugh. If you find yourself in a corner, forfeit, it isn't worth your life. Sakura started to argue, but she was told not to by Sasuke's grave expression. Okay Sasuke-kun, if I don't think I can win I'll give up. Sasuke let out a sigh of relief. Good, I would hate to have to get used to another teammate, that would be such a pain in the ass. Sakura laughed and started her match by going down the stairs. The cage was laughing merrily in the cage box. That was certainly a great fight. I can't wait to see the Uchiha back in action against that mystery Genin Uzumaki Naruto. That should be quite the fight, don't you think, Hokage-sama? Hiruzen gave a nod of approval. You're correct, Cage-sama, it'll be a superb match indeed. The cage was grinning beneath the veil that covered his face. Yes, it should be very illuminating. I can't wait to see how far my experiment has advanced. Hinata was sadly staring at the ground from the observation balcony. So Ni-san lost. Naruto gave her a comforting shoulder squeeze. He might have lost Hinata-chan, but he gained something far more valuable than a victory. He saw that his hatred and belief in fate can only take him so far in life, and I believe that his personality will take a turn for the better after this. Hinata raised her hopeful gaze to Naruto. You really think so? The blonde gave a nod. I do. How about after the first round we go check up on him? Hinata nodded, grinning. How adorable. Naruto heard a eep and felt something dig into his chest, but he also turned to see his teammate grinning. Naruto grinned. Thanks Sasuke. Now she'll never come out. Might as well tell Genma-san that she forfeits now. He could only assume that the vibration he felt on his chest was a giggle. Anyway, congratulations on that victory. Had Neji been just a little more observant he would have noticed that you were hanged as a rock, but he was too overconfident in his victory and lost focus. Sasuke said, and moved to the railing's side. So do you think she can win? When Naruto turned to face Sakura, he saw her avoiding multiple blows from a smirking Kin. The other girl didn't seem to have perspired at all, but Sakura seemed to be out of breath. In all honesty, no, she will lose, but maybe that's for the best. Out of the corner of Naruto's eye, he noticed Sasuke scowling at him. You better elaborate a bit. Sure, she hasn't been the nicest person to you, but I thought you would be above petty grudges. Naruto gave a headshake. That isn't what I meant. I hope that after this defeat she will realize that the life of a kunoichi is just as hard as the life of a shinobi, and maybe then she'll start taking her training seriously. Sasuke's face began to relax. Don't tell me you're starting to like her? Sasuke gave him another scowl. That's none of your business. Sakura was gasping for air on her hands and knees as her opponent taunted her, and Naruto laughed as he glanced back down over the railing. A medical team arrived to take Sakura away to have her injuries examined after she got up and raised her hand in forfeit after a few more taunts. Genma moved toward the middle of the ring. Will Subaku no Gaara and Tsurugi Masumi please make their way to the center of the ring? At that moment, a whirl of sand materialized beside Genma, and Gaara emerged with a twisted smile. Masumi approached Naruto, Hinata, and Sasuke and shouted down when she saw the Genin's ruthless intent to kill coming from the balcony. No thanks, I like living. I forfeit. Following the beating they had to witness just minutes earlier, the crowd, expecting a good match, let out a chorus of jeers. Gaara raised his gaze to his target. Come down here, trash, I will have your blood or I will. As Gaara's blue eyes turned purple and a ripple-like pattern appeared around them, 3 Tomo appeared on the ring nearest the center, and he gazed wide-eyed at the blonde next to his opponent even though Gaara had no idea who he was. Shukaku appeared to be frightened just by looking into his eyes, which silenced the demon inside of him. Unaccustomed to the unfamiliar quiet, Gaara shook his head and peered around with wide, terrified eyes. The proctor next to him, who had been vying for his attention the entire time, finally caught his eye. Oi! If you don't leave the stadium right now you will be disqualified and escorted out of the stadium. Gaara gave the man a fierce look before vanishing in a whirlpool of sand. Genma let out a sigh. Will Kinuta Dosu and Rock Lee please make their way down to the stadium for their match? They were quickly overtaken by a green blur that landed on the stadium floor's dirt. Yosh! It is finally my time to show my skills. An older lookalike got up in the stands and gave a thumbs up. Show them the power of hard work, Lee. Lee gave the figure a salute. Hi, Guy-sensei. At this point, a boy dressed like a mother emerged from the stairway and made his way to the center of the ring. Genma glanced at both competitors to check for second thoughts, but she found none. Hajime. With their fists cocked back, ready to punch, the 2 opponents charged at one another. Naruto was watching the match begin below, with Hinata nestled under his chin in front of him, when he felt a hand on his shoulder and a burst of chakra behind him. Gaara, you will remove your hand or I will remove it for you. There will be no second warning. Gaara was still behind Naruto when he felt the hand drop from his shoulder. What did you do? Naruto furrowed his brows as he peered over his shoulder. What are you talking about? Gaara gave the blonde a fierce look. I want to know what you did. I can't hear Shukaku anymore. He's still there. I can feel him, but it's like he's scared of you. He isn't whispering in my head anymore, and I want to know what you did. Naruto laughed. If we meet in the ring, I will tell you, otherwise just watch the matches proceed peacefully. After a few more seconds of glaring, the redhead turned to leave. Hinata raised her gaze to Naruto. What was that, Naruto-kun? Naruto gave a headshake. I'll tell you when we go see Neji. Lee was on his knees below. Gripping his head in agony, he flicked a metal device on his arm as he charged his opponent, and then everything went hazy for Lee. He had been through the most intense training, so it didn't hurt much when he felt like he had been kneed in the gut, but he had a terrible migraine in his head. In order to avoid being struck in the back of the head and potentially knocked out, Lee was able to leap forward in a series of rolls on the ground. Lee stood up on wobbly knees after pushing himself off the ground. If I can continue, I'll be able to demonstrate that perseverance is more valuable than skill. My objective will still be accomplished if I defeat Sasuke, even though I wanted to fight Neji. Dosu repeatedly charged him, but Lee was always one step ahead of him, and his migraine gradually got better. Lee eventually returned to his normal self after a few minutes of dodging. That is quite the jutsu you use there. It seems you use sound waves to disorient your opponents by attacking their inner ear, then you go in for the kill. Dosu laughed. Very perceptive, but just because you know what it is doesn't mean you can counter it. Once again, the bandaged teenager charged. Slamming his right arm back across his opponent's face, Lee unexpectedly vanished from his field of vision. Dosu then experienced a searing pain on the nape of his neck, followed by his eyes rolling up into his head and his collapse onto the floor. Lee bowed to his defeated foe. A great fight, Dosu-san, but if I know that you have to touch your gauntlet before you can use your attack, then I can strike in the time where you are preparing. While the medical staff was recovering Dosu, Genma entered the center of the ring. Winner by knockout, Rock Lee. Will Kankuro and Yamanaka Ino please come down to the stadium floor? While Ino appeared uncertain, Kankuro laughed and descended the stairs from the observation balcony. She was still pale with anxiety and fear despite Shikamaru and Choji's attempts to reassure her. Naruto approached the blonde after escaping Hinata's hold. She looked into his eyes as he placed a hand on her shoulder. Ino, I know we don't know each other very well, but the Ino I know wouldn't be intimidated by some weirdo who wears makeup. I can remember a girl from the academy who did whatever it took to reach her goals, even if that meant a little hard work, so go out there and kick that clown's ass." Wiping a tear from her eye, Ino nodded and grinned. "Thanks Naruto, that's just what I needed to hear." As he watched Ino dash down the stairs, Naruto grinned. He nodded to Shikamaru and Choji, who returned the nod with a silent "thank you," before approaching the Hyuga princess. She giggled as she looked up at him after he put his arms back around her. "Should I be jealous?" Grinning, Naruto glanced down at the Hyuga. "I don't know, should you?" After giving him a quick arm slap and grinning, Hinata and he both looked down at the battle going on below. Ino was staring at Kankuro, who had a big smirk on his face that shouted cockiness. Genma leapt back and held up his hand. "Hajime." In order to gain some distance from her opponent, Ino leapt back. She then waited for him to initiate contact and adjust her strategy accordingly. The thought of having to go on the defensive made Kankuro frown. "Let's see if I can resolve this with a little taijutsu. I don't want to have to divulge any more of Karasu's skills than necessary. All I can hope is that she doesn't use any strange jutsu." Kankuro rushed at Ino, effortlessly avoiding the kunai she carelessly hurled at him. "Hey, this might be simpler than I anticipated." Given that Ino hadn't resisted much, he was able to get closer to her without too much trouble. In an attempt to determine whether she was merely playing tricks on him and trying to conceal her abilities, he began using basic punches and kicks, but she wasn't. She was forced to her knees after he caught her with a forceful blow to the gut following multiple blocked blows. This is what the kunoichi of Konoha are like. This is pathetic. I know kids who aren't even shinobi yet who are stronger than you guys, or you leaf shinobi have gotten soft in these times of peace. With a scowl, Ino withdrew a kunai. "Oh yeah, I'll show you soft." To his astonishment, she simply chopped off her hair, but Kankuro leapt back in case she had a secret. "What the?" Kankuro erupted in uncontrollable laughter. "You decided to give yourself a haircut. This is great. Oh man, my sides hurt. I'll give it to you. It's certainly a creative jutsu. Whoever heard of a jutsu where someone laughs themselves to death?" Ino gave him a fierce look and tossed her hair into the air, allowing it to fall between her and her opponent in the middle of the arena. She collected her chakra and directed it at her adversary. "Chakra hair trap technique." Kankuro gave a blink. "What the hell? I can't move. Hey, I guess you aren't so useless after all, but what now?" Ino grinned. "This, Shintenshin no Jutsu, mind-body switch technique." Once she had Kankuro, Ino would force him to give up the match by projecting her mind onto him. She was going to quit the next fight because she knew she couldn't win using traditional methods, but this guy insulted her too many times. When her technique reached Kankuro, it immediately bounced off, recoiled, and she fell on her back while Kankuro laughed, even though she believed she had won the match. Exhausted from using so much chakra so quickly, Ino got to her feet shakily. What happened? I know that I had you." Kankuro grinned. "Did you?" The wrappings on Kankuro's back suddenly came loose, and another Kankuro fell to the ground as the one Ino had been fighting began to transform into what appeared to be a puppet. Then, with its arms spread wide and blades emerging on the edges, the puppet threw itself at Ino. Ino frantically lifted her arm. "I forfeit." Ino collapsed to the ground in disbelief at how near death she had been as the puppet came to a halt just inches from her body after returning Karasu to him. Kankuro wrapped it up like a mummy as Kankuro made his way back to the stairs to rejoin the group. Genma emerged into the center of the arena. "Winner by forfeit, Kankuro. Will the participants please clear the floor, and can Inuzuka Kiba and Akamichi Choji please make their way to the arena?" The cage was laughing up in the cage box. "I must say that the young Yamanaka's plan was indeed well thought out. It was just her bad luck that she had to face my son." The Hokage gave a nod of approval. "Indeed, it would seem that your son was the worst possible matchup for her, especially with him able to use the puppet to block any of her mind transfer techniques." "Yes. Well, let's see how this next match plays out. In Inuzuka versus an Akamichi. Two heavy hitters squaring off against each other should definitely prove to be an interesting match." Hiruzen cast a calculating glance at the cage. Yes, it should be." Choji and Kiba were grinning at one another. They had been friends in the academy, and some of their best memories were of skipping class to get food and then getting reprimanded by Iruka when they eventually showed up with bloated stomachs. Shikamaru would have joined them, but he decided that it would be much simpler to simply doze off in class rather than expend the energy to skip. Kiba placed Akamaru next to him and assumed the taijutsu stance of his clan. "Let's have a good match, Choji." All the big boy could do was nod and smile. Genma leapt back to make space for the two boys. "Hajime." In an attempt to end the match before he had to injure one of his friends, Kiba smirked and charged in without Akamaru. Choji grinned. Buban Baika no Jutsu, partial multi-size technique. Amused, Kiba watched as he rushed straight into his friend's growing belly. It engulfed him like a balloon. And in order to push Kiba back against the wall, Choji arched his back and sent chakra into his stomach. When Kiba realized that he had struck the far wall hard enough to force the air out of his lungs, all of the laughter left his face. After a few moments, Kiba regained his composure after falling to his knees in the dirt. Damn Choji, never expected you to throw your weight around, literally. Choji laughed when his friend made a joke. Good one Kiba, now let's get serious. Kiba approached Akamaru and petted his dog. Look Choji, let's just use out best jutsu head on, and not drag this on. I know you don't want to hurt me, and I'm not too fond of the idea in fighting you either, so let's just throw whatever we have at each other and let whatever happens, happen. After taking a green pill, the chubby boy started to accumulate as much chakra as he could. Sounds good to me, just do be upset when you lose. Taking a pill from his pocket, Kiba smirked and ate it. He then threw an identical pill to Akamaru, who caught it in his mouth and swallowed it. They both exploded with vitality, to the extent that Akamaru's fur turned red. Jujin Bunshin, beast human clone. Still brimming with chakra, Akamaru changed into a perfect replica of Kiba. You ready boy? While Kiba scratched the back of his head, Akamaru whimpered and cast a worried glance at his partner. Yeah I know, but I think we can do it. Kiba focused by closing his eyes. I must make sure I do this correctly. Jinju Kanbi Henge. Sotoro, man-beast transformation combo, two-headed wolf. A massive, two-story, two-headed wolf emerged in all its snarling glory after a puff of smoke from the stadium cleared. We succeeded, boy, in fact, we succeeded, a full 2 years before you could have, Hana, take that. The fat boy who had remained standing there earlier was the target of the big wolf's two heads. Chakra suddenly erupted from his body and started to envelop him, encircling his form with tendrils. Chobaika no Jutsu, super multi-size technique. Choji reached unthinkable heights, surpassing the once monstrous double-headed wolf. Kiba was perspiring in her head. Choji is acting really out here, man. We can't let this boy down, so let's do it. Kiba started spinning around, accelerating and producing tiny wind gusts that appeared to rip through the arena's floor. In the meantime, Choji pulled his head and limbs back, forming what looked like a human wrecking ball. He also started spinning, accelerating and creating a wind buffer in front of himself. The two superpowers unexpectedly collided head-on. Cho Nikuden Sensha, superhuman bullet tank. Cho Garoga, superfang wolf fang. The civilians' untrained eyes turned away from the scene in front of them as the force of the collision sent gusts of wind tearing into the crowd. Each side threw as much chakra and strength into their attack as they could, and neither side bowed. It felt as though the fight would never end, until Kiba finally started to lose ground. No, I will not be defeated easily. He was able to push Choji back to their starting position with a burst of resolve, and he gradually gained ground. He made an effort to keep up, but he was exhausted from using too much chakra on his jutsu earlier and started to feel the effects of fatigue as Choji slowed his rotation and started to shrink back to his normal size. He dropped the rotation and was pushed back, slamming into the far wall. He knew that if Kiba had anything left, he was doomed because he was also reeling from the effects of the chakra pill he had taken earlier. When Choji raised his head, he saw the double-headed wolf vanish and Kiba and Akamaru suddenly reappear. Dropping to the ground in silence with his hands on his knees and perspiration streaming down his face, Choji was doing everything he could to keep from collapsing. He tried to catch his ragged breath and swallowed the dry lump in his burning throat. Genma chose to step in after observing the two combatants' conditions. Winner by knockout, Akamichi Choji. When Sasuke finished his match, the crowd cheered louder than ever before watching those incredible heavy hitters square off head-on. Sent a rush of adrenaline through everyone. They certainly thrilled everyone, even though they weren't the most nuanced jutsu. To make sure there was no long-term harm, Kiba and Choji were brought to the medical bay to have their wounds assessed and their chakra pathways looked at. To get past the raucous applause, Genma cleared his throat. Will Hyuga Hinata and Tamari please make their way down to the stadium for their match? When Hinata heard her name called, her eyes unconsciously widened in terror, particularly when she had to battle an unidentified kunoichi. She glanced up into Naruto's big blue eyes after feeling a comforting squeeze on her shoulder as he slipped something into her kunai pouch. He distracted her with a quick peck on her forehead. Just do your best, Hinata-chan, and remember, no matter what happens down there, I will always be proud of you. With a nod and a smile, Hinata wriggled free of his hold and headed for the stairs. Behind him, Naruto sensed a taller girl with her hair pulled back in 4 pigtails, grinning at him. I hope you said your goodbyes, it's nothing personal, but how about we make a deal? After I wipe the floor with her you take me out for a night on the town? Naruto gave a headshake. You assume she is just some pretty wallflower, but you are mistaken. While she is very beautiful, she is far from helpless, so you would do well to not underestimate her. Something caught the girl's wrist, causing her to turn around after she HMPFED and started to leave. She turned back to face the big purple eyes that had rings extending from the middle, each of which had 3 tomos. I won't tell you to hold back since that would be unfair to Hinata-chan, but if you hurt her unnecessarily, or do anything malicious to maim her, I'll make sure to personally make your life a living hell. Do I make myself clear? Temari nodded slowly and paled visibly. The blonde's eyes returned to their typical blue color when she blinked after swallowing the lump in her throat. Temari returned to the stadium floor. As Naruto saw Hinata moving toward the middle of the arena floor, he sighed and turned to look down below. Sasuke slapped Naruto on the back after letting out a haggard breath. Geez, that was intense. I swear I could have seen my breath there for a second. So what was with the theatrics back there? Naruto gave a shrug. I won't let anything ever happen to her, not when I've finally found someone who accepts me for me. Still a little stunned by what she had just witnessed, Temari was frowning at her blue-haired opponent. I've never seen any dojutsu like that. Is that the reason Gaara became so calm? Perhaps that is what happened to Uzumaki's opponent, because it felt like staring into a blank space, an unending chasm of unadulterated power. She barely had time to avoid her opponent's 2 blows to her shoulders, and she hardly heard the match begin. Shit. This girl is serious, and he was right in any case. She's done if I can get some distance. To deflect further blows from her Hyuga opponent, Temari leapt back and held her huge war fan in front of her. She hurled a wind gust infused with chakra at her opponent, who was able to roll sideways and avoid its reach. Not bad, girly, but giving me some breathing room was a really bad idea. You lost the match as soon as you backed off. She sent Hinata a few more powerful wind gusts that tore at her, and all she could do was try to escape their reach, but she wasn't spared. Her arms and legs were covered in small cuts, but thankfully, they weren't severe enough to stop Hinata from fighting. Temari positioned herself defensively behind her fan, keeping an eye out for any movement from her opponent. She's right. Damn it, I should never have allowed her space. All I have to do is figure out how to get back in touch. She searched for anything she could use in her weapons pouch. When she packed it, she sensed something that wasn't there when she removed them. She smiled and looked up at the observation balcony, where she saw Naruto smiling back at her. They felt small and round. The tiny smoke bombs in her hand contained a potent eye irritant that she recognized from one of Naruto's many tricks from his academy days. I have to approach this carefully because it might backfire. Ironically, I suppose, since I have a dojutsu myself, I'm going to use something to disable her eyes. Hinata drew a kunai as fast as she could and hurled it at her opponent. She didn't notice the explosive tag attached, but she did bat it away as Hinata had predicted, sending it down into the ground in front of her with a gust of wind from her fan. Tiny pieces of earth flew in all directions as the tag detonated. Temari was not harmed in the least by this, but it provided Hinata with the brief diversion she required to flick her wrist quickly enough to launch the tiny balls of smoke in Temari's direction before throwing them. Hinata made sure to jump high enough to catch the sun behind her, temporarily blinding Temari and making the tiny smoke bombs almost invisible, until they detonated, that is. Temari was surrounded by smoke, and her eyes widened. What is she doing? In her opinion, I'll simply extinguish all of this smoke before. Her eyes began to water, and she felt the impulse to wipe them. Her head spinning, her throat burning from the irritant, she shut off her fan and rushed out of the smoke for fresh air. Temari's vision was tunneled and blurry. Despite her intense blinking to remove the chemical from her eyes, she felt Hinata close the 2 tenketsu on her shoulders that controlled the chakra flow to her arms, but she never saw the blue blur rush behind her. With Hinata's palm just centimeters from the back of her skull, Temari fell to her knees, dropping her fan as her arms went limp. In the field, Genma leapt. Temari is unable to continue. Winner, Hyuga Hinata. The crowd cheered loudly, but Hinata was only paying attention to one person, and his viewpoint was the only one that counted. With pride shining in his eyes, the blonde was beaming from ear to ear. With a smile, Hinata faced her opponent once more. Anyo, Temari-san? Would you like me to reopen your tenketsu for you? The girl in front of her was genuinely concerned. Even though Temari's vision was just returning to her and she was on the verge of pouting and storming off, she sighed in response. If you don't mind, I'm glad to see that there is at least one kunoichi in Konoha who takes her training seriously. Hinata merely smiled in response and forced the closed tenketsu open by sending chakra into them once more. Arigato, Temari-san. and T that was a great match. Tamari got to her feet and turned her arms. She picked up her fan and strapped it to her back once she discovered they were operational once more. I guess it was see you around girly. While Hinata rushed off the field back up to the observation balcony, Tamari waved and went off to the regular stands. Before declaring the next match, Genma waited for them to depart. Will Nara Shikamaru and Abumi Zaku please make their way to the stadium floor please? Hiruzen laughed and turned to face a visibly agitated Kazekage. Well, that was unexpected. I was certain that young Hinata was doomed, but it appears that she has picked up some tips from our most unpredictable ninja. I am inclined to agree, the Kazekage said, squinting at the stadium below. That move was quite unconventional, but obviously effective. That demonstrated excellent planning skills and inventiveness, which are uncommon in today's world. All I can say is that I wish my daughter had fought harder. With a shake of his head, the Hokage said, I think your daughter performed admirably. If you say so. The Kazekage continued to glare at the ground. He hadn't said it, but she could see it in his eyes, the way he looked at her, the way he held her, it was magical, and it made every moment together pure bliss. Hinata ran up the stairs towards her destination, the arms of her blonde shore. They had only been together for a little over a week, but it had been the best week of her life. Naruto had always treated her with respect, loyalty, and most importantly, love. She was clearly confused and hurt when she arrived at the top of the stairs, almost knocking down Shikamaru who was coming down, and she didn't see Naruto. She was certain that he would be among the first to congratulate her, so she was pleasantly surprised when two arms gently but firmly pulled her into a huge from behind. I knew you could succeed, Hinata-chan. That was excellent. You demonstrated to everyone here that you were every bit the resilient and strong kunoichi I knew you were, but more importantly, I believe you proved it to yourself, which is why I am so proud of you. Hinata sighed and sank against him, partially closing her eyes, never wanting the moment to end, his voice so husky that it made her melt in his arms. Hi, with a laugh, Naruto led them to the balcony to watch the game below. Shikamaru thought he would walk in, demonstrate a few jutsu, employ some clever strategy, and then forfeit, but this Zaku guy had to come in full force. The whole situation was troublesome. No, even that word wasn't strong enough to describe it. It only took a minute more, a mere 60 seconds, to think of a plan that would win, but it would require great timing. He appeared to shoot compressed air out of the tubes in his hands. A terrible matchup against someone who needed a few seconds to trap his enemies in a shadow binding method. Nara, what's wrong? You guys are supposed to be brilliant on the battlefield, but all you've done so far is dance around like fools. Dude, this is going to be such a drag, Shikamaru said, shaking his head. Zaku just grinned amusedly as he threw multiple kunai at the ground in front of him. What is up with all you Konoha shinobi? Are you not taught how to aim? Even blasting them away wasn't necessary. Shit. Zaku looked down to see explosive notes attached to the kunai after Shikamaru simply pointed down. Fortunately, Zaku had time to jump back against the wall before the notes could detonate. When he looked up, he saw that his opponent was wearing a ram seal, and he raised his arms to form a defense against any jutsu he might use if necessary. However, that was his plan, and at the moment, he was unable to move his arms. Scratch that, he was unable to move his entire body. Kagemain no Jutsu, shadow imitation technique, successful. With only his eyes to move, Zaku looked down and saw a dark shadow attaching itself to his own shadow and extending around the outer wall. I walked directly into his territory, and those explosive notes were purposefully thrown to make me jump back into the shadow. Shikamaru laughed. I'm glad you figured out my plan. As terrible and hastily thrown together as it was no less effective. So you have me caught. What now? Zaku glared at his opponent while struggling against his restraints. You waste more chakra the longer you drag this out, and I won't forfeit. You're right, Shikamaru said, rubbing his chin, making Zaku follow suit. You have the upper hand in this race against time. Since I have no control over what you say, I really can't do anything that would force you to forfeit, but I can do this. When Shikamaru suddenly leaned back, he brought his opponent with him. Zaku was knocked unconscious when he struck the stadium wall's cold, hard stone, while Shikamaru struck the air. Make fun of me all you want, but don't ever bad talk my family and friends while I'm around, man. Way too troublesome, Shikamaru said, releasing the jutsu and letting Zaku's body fall to the ground. While a medical team retrieved Zaku's unconscious body for treatment, Shikamaru placed his hands behind his head and made his way back to the stairs from which he had come. In the center of the field, Genma declared, winner by knockout, Nara Shikamaru. In contrast to the raw power that the others desired, there was a good amount of applause from those who could recognize the clever strategy that was demonstrated. After a brief pause, Genma said, Aburame Shino vs Tenten will be the final bout of the first round. Would the fighters kindly head down to the stadium? 5 minutes later, a girl wearing a Chinese-style shirt with her hair in buns that gave her a panda-like appearance was standing across from a stoic-looking boy wearing sunglasses and a high-collared coat. Hajime. In order to give the fighters space, the proctor leapt back. Her aim was accurate, and many of the kunai found their mark on the boy before he vanished into a swarm of insects. The girl immediately produced a scroll and channeled chakra through the ink, calling forth a storm of kunai hurtling towards her opponent. Aburame and their strange bug jutsu are so strange that I can never get used to them. A fist sailed harmlessly over her, and she ducked out of sheer reflex, taking several jumps back to gain space and avoiding her opponent. The match was decided with that move. I would suggest that you give up, Tenten-san. Tenten sneered and produced another scroll, saying, "Please don't get ahead of yourself, I haven't even begun yet, and you missed." She started using the scroll to channel chakra, but the weapons she called forth only made it halfway to their target before losing speed and collapsing into big metal lumps on the stadium floor. Tenten's gaze shifted between her opponent and her scroll. "Nani? What's happening?" "I told you that match was already decided the moment you dodged my attack," Shino said, placing his hands in his coat pockets in a matter of seconds. "The male Kakaichu swarmed over you without being noticed because I had already implanted a female Kakaichu on your body and she released pheromones. I will have to totally deplete your chakra if you don't forfeit." After frowning, Tenten gave in and held up her hand, saying, "Okay, I give up." A tiny mass of tiny insects flew out of Tenten's clothing and retreated back into Shino's body as Shino nodded. Genma advanced into the center of the stadium and declared, "Aburame Shino won by forfeit. The Chunin exam finals first round is now over. The first round competitors will have an hour-long break to regenerate their chakras and get as much rest as possible." Hinata, still in Naruto's embrace, raised her head in the balcony and said, "Anyo, Naruto-kun?" With a smile, Naruto turned around and walked toward the stadium complex's entrance, leaving Hinata standing at the railing. He grinned as he looked back over his shoulder. "Well, Hinata-chan, are you coming? I had assumed that we would go see your cousin." The unsaid message hung in the air as Naruto glanced at his raven-haired teammate, who was grinning at him, and Hinata squeaked and ran to his side to continue towards the medical bay. The rematch is 1 hour away, though his mind was elsewhere. Naruto held Hinata's hand as he led her down the corridor toward the stadium's medical wing to visit her cousin as he had promised. "I'll be exposing myself to the world in 59 minutes. Naruto-kun." "What's the matter?" Naruto turned to face his Hyuga princess, halted his stride, and smiled broadly. "Hinata-chan, what do you mean?" "I can tell when something is bothering you, Naruto-kun," the girl said, taking her hand away from his. "I can tell when your smile is real and when it's fake, even though it might fool everyone else." With a sigh, Naruto took her hands in his. "Hinaheim, nothing ever gets past you?" "No, it doesn't." Hinata blushed at her new cute moniker. Naruto abruptly became serious, saying, "Hinata, I want you to promise me something for my own sanity. I need you to make me a promise." "Okay, I'll promise." Hinata swallowed, having never seen Naruto so solemn in his life. With a sigh, Naruto said, "I want you to hide because I'm going to expose a serious threat to the village during my match. You should remain in the safest location you can think of, and you should not leave it with anyone until I find you." Hinata's eyes were filled with confusion and fear, which Naruto could see. But why?" The brunette nodded. "Something very bad is about to happen in Konoha, and I can't let you get hurt. Please, just get anyone you can and stay somewhere safe and out of sight." Hinata wanted to argue that she was a kunoichi and not at all helpless, but she knew that he wanted her to make the decision herself, even though he saw only one choice and that if she didn't agree, he would take her somewhere with his kamui. "Okay, Naruto-kun, as soon as Neji-Nisan is ready to move, I'll take him and hide somewhere safe." With a sigh of relief, Naruto drew her close to him in a tender kiss that was brief and unpassionate but perfectly expressed his gratitude. "Thank you, let's visit your cousin now." Hinata was only able to nod. Naruto couldn't believe his eyes, which was significant to someone who was a god's reincarnation. Before him, on his hands and knees, was one of the world's most arrogant men, pleading for forgiveness. Naruto glanced to the cot Neji had been in just moments earlier and discovered a scroll that appeared to have been stored in a drawer for 10 years or more, and the blonde could only surmise that this was the reason for the odd behavior. "Hinata-sama Gomen, I've been a horrible person to you, holding you responsible for something that you could have controlled just as well as I could as a cousin and a member of the Hyuga branch family. I have let you down. Will you ever pardon me for my previous transgressions?" After shedding a tear, Hinata encircled her cousin with her arms and gave him a firm embrace. "Of course I can." Neji Nissan, if forgiveness isn't the purpose of family, what is it? Naruto grinned at the heartwarming scene in front of him, but he still had 45 minutes to work. I'll let you two have a moment alone. I'll be right outside the door. Without waiting for an answer, he stepped outside the door and shut it behind him, putting his hands in a well-known hand seal that caused 4 cage buncheons to materialize. Hanged as civilians, I want you 4 to go to each of the village's 4 corners after that, clear the area of any suspicious people, make more cage buncheons, and do it all over again. I'll let you handle the rest of the village in the immediate area while I lock down the stadium, you get it? The 4 highs all twisted through Kamui to reach their destinations. Today is the day I show the world that their actions have consequences, Naruto said, gazing up at the sky outside the window to bring about peace. I will have to shed blood, but clemency will be granted to those who ask for it. The day of reckoning is today. The sound of a door sliding interrupted his thoughts, and Hinata emerged, wiping a tear from her eye. Do you feel better? Hinata grinned and nodded before approaching Naruto and giving him a torso hug. Better than ever, she said. I'm glad, Naruto said, grinning and kissing the top of her head. I've been meaning to ask you a crucial question, Hinata. Uncertain of what to anticipate from his final query, she raised her head off his shoulder and stepped back. What is it? Naruto was scratching his head. Well, since I have to leave the village and everything after this, I wanted to talk about us, specifically what we're going to do once it's time for me to leave. Hinata sighed sorrowfully as her eyes started to well up with tears. She had anticipated this moment ever since Naruto had revealed that his quest for peace would require him to travel the world. Just promise me that you won't forget about Emmy. Naruto appeared perplexed. What? You believed I was? No, oh no, don't be silly. I was wondering if you would come with me, Naruto said, grabbing Hinata and bringing her in for a fierce hug. She opened her eyes, blinked a few times, and then burst out laughing. You want me to accompany you? J stands for? Just the 2 of us. W for? No one to interrupt us, and A for alone. Well, I know it's a lot to think about, having to leave your family for an indefinite period of time, though we would visit every now and then, Naruto said, smiling worriedly, unsure of how to interpret Hinata's laughter. Just give it some thought, okay? Hinata nodded. Leaving behind all of her friends and family hadn't even crossed her mind, especially since her family was now beginning to reunite. Oh okay Naruto-kun, I'll think about it. That's all I ask for, and I'll support any decision you come to, the blonde said with a smile and another quick kiss on the top of her head. Be careful now. He vanished in a whirl, leaving no sign of his presence. Outside the hot springs on the village's far side, Naruto appeared. So he's not even keeping an eye on the tests? Looking around, the blonde noticed a big man skulking behind a bush, which provided a great vantage point for spying on anyone who happened to be in the hot springs at that moment. Unobserved, Naruto approached the man from behind and said, Jiraiya of the Sannin, I presume. The man recoiled, but he realized it was a male voice, and he slowly got to his feet, turning to look at Naruto. Look buddy, I don't have time to babysit any brats today, so why don't you run along and... When the old Sannin looked into Naruto's eyes and saw the blue turn to purple with rings extending out from the center, he paused and froze in the middle of his sentence. Don't be impolite, Jiraiya, come now, we have a lot to talk about. Once again, Genma stood in the center of the arena, and unlike the first round, every seat was occupied, with some people even occupying stairs or railings in order to secure a good seat. Welcome to the second round of the Chunin exams, Konoha residents and shinobi. Yelling and cheering at the top of their lungs, the crowd went wild, and it took a long time before it was actually quiet enough for Genma to resume her conversation. Uzumaki Naruto vs Uchiha Sasuke will be the first match. Could both of those competitors please descend to the arena floor so that the match can start? No one could explain what happened next, but Sasuke appeared smiling in a swirl of leaves, waiting for his rematch, while Naruto appeared out of nowhere, as if he were translucent and vanished like a ghost through the arena floor. As they attempted to make sense of what they had just witnessed, everyone blinked multiple times. Oi, Naruto, said Sasuke, shaking his head. That was what kind of shunshin? Everything will be explained soon, Sasuke, Naruto said, simply staring at him without showing any interest. I want to start by apologizing to you, Sasuke. You don't deserve what is about to happen. Has the match begun yet, Proctor? Genma lowered his hand after adjusting the senbon in his mouth. Hajime. Sasuke flared his Sharingan to life as Naruto assumed his same taijutsu stance as before, and instead of waiting for Naruto to get ready, he charged the blonde as quickly as he could. Sasuke leapt and attempted a roundhouse kick with his right leg against Naruto's head, but Naruto blocked it as he had anticipated by raising his arm. Gotcha! Dropping to the ground, Sasuke used his other leg to kick through Naruto's guard, catching the blonde by the jaw and sending him tumbling across the stadium floor. After wiping some blood from his mouth, Naruto smiled and said, "Nice kick, Sasuke, but don't get ahead of yourself just yet." Sasuke grinned and charged once more, and they exchanged blows, each taking a good number of blows. They soon parted ways, and Naruto raised his hands in his trademark hand seal as they glanced at one another across the stadium, both of them panting a little. "I suppose it's time to take things seriously." Bunshin no Jutsu, Multiple Shadow Clone Technique by Taju Cage. When more than 24 Narutos appeared, Sasuke grinned and gave them a close look before they all charged at a silent command. Due to his instincts, Sasuke ducked, caught a shadow clone's fist, and threw him forward into another clone directly in front of him. Sasuke then leapt to his feet and allowed multiple shadow clones to collide on the spot where he was just. Kaden Hosenka no Jutsu, Fire Style. Art of the Phoenix Flower, the Uchiha exhaled deeply. Sasuke, panting more heavily than before, was relieved to see Naruto, the real Naruto, equally exhausted, and they charged at each other again, exchanging more blows as a dozen fireballs were directed towards the mass of shadow clones, setting them all ablaze in a ferocious conflagration. People, particularly the competitors themselves, were staring up in the stands with wide eyes. When Shino and Shikamaru approached Hinata, who was standing at the railing, gripping the metal so tightly that it made her knuckles white, Shino placed a hand on her shoulder to draw her attention, and she almost leapt out of her skin. "What's causing your anxiety, Hinata?" With a shake of her head, Hinata said, "G Gomen, I'm just nervous for my fight is all." Knowing that she was withholding something, Shikamaru squinted his eyes and shook his head, dismissing it as troublesome. "Do you know what's happening down there, Hinata? I'm having trouble understanding it. Naruto is clearly up to something, but I simply don't understand what he's doing." "Gomen Shikamaru-san, but I can't say," said Hinata, shaking her head. "I believe I know Naruto-kun's plan, but it is his place to tell everyone." Glancing down at the match below, Shikamaru placed his hands on the railing and said, "Well, that's all fine and dandy, but they're just standing there doing nothing, and it looks like Sasuke is sweating up a storm." To avoid answering any more questions, Hinata turned her back on him. He was gasping for air, his arms felt like they weighed several hundred pounds, and his limbs burned as Sasuke finally gained the upper hand. Naruto was in worse shape, and his fatigue gave Sasuke the opening he needed to finish the fight. Naruto vanished like a specter as he was about to land the final blow. The worst part was that Naruto didn't appear to be at all exhausted. In fact, he appeared to have been standing there the entire time. Sasuke collapsed on the ground, gasping for air, and slowly ascended on trembling legs. He looked across the stadium floor to see Naruto sitting there with his arms crossed and a bored expression. "What did you do to me? Wah?" Naruto breathed deeply. "I already apologized, Sasuke. You really don't deserve to be used this way, but there was no other choice." Sasuke gave his opponent a fierce look and said, "What do you mean, no other option? You have just been introduced to Inten Yin Release, the origin of all genjutsu, which is used on the imagination to create form out of nothingness," Naruto said, gesturing to the audience. "To you, we have been engaged in a bloody conflict that would have occurred if we had engaged in combat no more than 2 weeks prior. While your body expended energy to supply that imagined battle that you envisioned, the rest of the world stood by." But Naruto wasn't done, and he flashed through several hand signs. The crowd gasped, especially the shinobi, who truly understood the full implications of what Naruto just said. He had complete control over one of the most dangerous powers in existence, control over each of the senses to the point where the mind believed it was reality and reacted as such. Jukai Koden, Wood Release Secret Technique, Birth of Dense Woodland, Mokoden Hajutsu. A number of shinobi stood ready to intervene if Naruto chose to go overboard, but the tree soon stopped growing and Sasuke was left hanging in midair. As Naruto turned to face the crowd, Sasuke was powerless against the enormous tree that grew beneath him and ensnared him in its branches as it grew upward. "This should definitely be interesting. I hope you handle this with care, Naruto," said an older Hokage grinning under his hat up in the cage booth. "To answer your questions, I can use the renowned Mokuton bloodline of the Senju clan's Shodiami Hokage. Regarding your subsequent inquiry, I was born and reared as an Uzumaki, so no, I am not a Senju. The solution to the puzzle requires me to travel back 11 days to when the treacherous Sannin Orochimaru kidnapped and tortured me." More gasps came from the audience, and a number of people were staring at Naruto because they were quick to link the local Jinchuriki to the biggest leaf trader since Madara. "He forced a foreign chakra into my system and conducted experiments on me under duress. It was the physical expressions of parts of the Biju," specifically numbers 1 through 8, and not just any chakra because of my Uzumaki ancestry and my position as the host to the Kyuubi no Kitsune. I was able to survive when that much raw, volatile chakra was thrown into someone else's body. The younger generation was still in shock after learning that the young blonde was the host of the creature that nearly destroyed Konoha 13 years ago, but Naruto ignored the many yells and insults directed at him and continued on because he had to get this out. Yes, for those of you who are unaware, the Yondaime selected me as a newborn to house the Kyuubi, and he sacrificed his life to seal the Kyuubi deep within me, where it would remain imprisoned indefinitely. Orochimaru tampered with the seal, and when pieces of the other Biju were introduced, the Kyuubi changed, causing him to remain trapped there indefinitely until my death. He transformed into the Jubi, the origin of all chakra and the maker of this world. People were staring around in horror at this point, and the local outcast simply told them that he now held a being even more powerful than the Kyuubi, and that he had been given abilities that no one could ever imagine. No, there was someone else who held this honor before me. I am not the first person to do so. He was Otsutsuki Hagoromo, also called the Sage of the Six Paths or the Rakudo Sennin. The father of all jutsu and the world's savior. The Jubi selected me to be the second coming of the Sage of the Six Paths, the Nidaime Rakudo Sennin, his reincarnation. People gasped as they saw his eyes turn a dark violet color and rings spread out across his entire eye, and then 6 tomo appeared, 3 on each of the rings closest to the center, as he opened his eyes wide and channeled chakra into them to make his point. Everyone, including Sasuke, watched in wonder as Naruto cut his palm with a kunai and a black substance oozed out of the wound, forming into a shakuho, a Buddhist ringed staff used for prayer. I have accepted Hagoromo's mission as my own, and as such I will strive to create a world where peace and understanding are used instead of war and pain, or I will die trying. Naruto glanced up at the observation balcony and met Hinata's eyes, who was grinning slightly. Naruto nodded and smiled back, and Hinata turned to comply with his request and find a hiding spot until he arrived to collect her. Naruto glanced up at the cage box and met Hiruzen's eyes. Naruto nodded again, and the elderly Hokage nodded in return. Then, just as feathers started to fall on the stadium's entire audience, the cage box exploded with a tremendous explosion. So it's begun. The cage bunshin was created by Naruto with the words, "Take Sasuke and put him somewhere safe, he is too exhausted to be of any help." The clone nodded, released Sasuke from his bonds with his chakra, and ran off with him in spite of his protests. Naruto slammed his staff into the ground, causing it to stand upright, and sat down cross-legged, closing his eyes and releasing his chakra, allowing him to use his senses to identify which shinobi were friendly and which were enemies, trapping the enemies in the illusion of Inten. When the stadium was cleared, Naruto got back up and grabbed his staff. Kakashi then landed directly behind Naruto, and before he could say anything, Naruto spoke to him. "I have a Hokage right now, so save, and I will respond to your questions later, Hitaki, while my clones handle the invasion. I need you to assist in escorting civilians to the shelters." Explosions erupted throughout the stadium, and fighting erupted throughout the village, causing many to scream in fear as some shinobi attempted to guide them to the bunkers where they could seek refuge. Kakashi started to say something, but Naruto leapt to his feet and fled, heading for the room of a big building where a huge purple barrier was forming. An Oto Junin shinobi was impatiently awaiting confirmation of the summons that Orochimaru had ordered outside the western wall. "Why is it taking so long?" The Suna team leader slowly raised his head as several of the Suna Chunin gathered around a large ceiling matrix flinched. "I apologize, but this summoned more chakra than we initially anticipated. Just give us a little more time, please." "You were already running on borrowed time," the Oto Junin said, squinting at the man. "Your previous leader discovered the hard way that Lord Orochimaru is not kind to those who fail him." As the Oto Junin turned away, another Oto Nin leapt down beside him, holding a broken arm and blood streaming down his face. The Suna man went pale and resumed channeling chakra as quickly as he could. "Be quick. Before he arrives, you have to complete the summon." After observing the man's condition, the Suna team intensified their efforts. The Oto Junin gave the man a solider pill and assisted him in sitting down. "Woru, please calm down. What are you talking about? Get done before anyone else arrives." After swallowing the pill and taking a few deep breaths, the man who was identified as Woru said, "We were waiting in the proper places, disguised, and waiting for the signal to start the attack, but we were suddenly surrounded on all sides just before the signal was given. He was everywhere, it was a slaughter, and we had no chance at all. He's not far behind me, but I just barely made it out, and his eyes, oh, God, those eyes were the worst." The man began to shake and cupped his hands around his head. With a sigh, the Oto Junin said, "Shit, Orochimaru is going to be pissed." Orochimaru is the least of your problems right now. The last thing the Oto Junin saw before he passed out was a pair of ominous purple eyes with rings as he turned to face the voice. Hinata felt a rumbling around her as what she could only assume was a huge battle raged on all around her as she ran down the hallway with Neji's arm wrapped around her shoulder to support him. We must reach the shelters before we encounter the enemy, so hurry up, Neji-Nisan. Neji made every effort to stand up for himself, but his nervous system was affected by the Uchiha's blow to the back of his head, which made it difficult for him to walk quickly. Hinata-sama Gomen, I'll be alright on my own, so just go, I am familiar with the route. No, said Hinata, shaking her head, I will not abandon you to your own devices. When a figure appeared at the exit as they were about to reach the end of the hallway, Hinata stopped and studied the newcomer. The same silver-haired teenager who had given up before the preliminary exams, but her attention was drawn to the sound note on his headband. Hello there. Where are you heading to in such a hurry? The boy said, pushing his glasses up on his nose. We have a lot to talk about, so come and stay a while. As soon as he placed his hands by his sides, a blue chakra aura surrounded them. All the other competitors had long since left, with the Oto Ninkin running off as soon as the fighting began and the remaining Konoha shinobi running off to assist with the evacuation or to fight their own battles. Temari and Kankuro were sitting cross-legged in the middle of the floor, trying to persuade their brother to run, fight, or do something. Temari was rapidly becoming agitated. Look, I never liked this foolish invasion plan anyway, so it's okay if you don't want to fight, but at least we should go somewhere secure. No, we will stay right here and not get in anyone's way, the redhead said, shaking his head. The redhead glared at Kankuro as he attempted to grab his brother to help him stand up, saying, Look, Gaara, this isn't a safe place. You're wrong, it's the safest for us right here, the boy in question said, shaking his head once more. Father, isn't that correct? With his dojutsu activated, a Naruto cage bunshin twisted into position directly in front of the three. No, Gaara. Shukaku's father passed away a long time ago. I am merely his reincarnation, he said. However, that does not preclude us from becoming friends. Gaara got up and said, I don't know what you are, but for the first time in my life Shukaku isn't whispering in my ear, and I feel more at peace than I have in a long time. I don't know what kind of pain you have gone through, Shukaku, but tormenting this poor child won't ease your agony, Naruto said, approaching Gaara and placing a hand on his head, causing the redhead's eyes to glaze over. If not for me, then for your father's legacy, I ask that you allow this boy to rest in peace. Gaara fell to the ground without a reply, and Naruto turned to face the boy before turning to face his siblings. Keep him safe, the invasion is almost over. As Naruto vanished in a swirl, Temari hurried to her brother's side. When a clone stationed atop the Hokage tower spread his senses across the stadium, his eyes widened when he saw a very sinister chakra rushing towards a very familiar presence. Naruto had made several cage bunshins sit atop random buildings and spread their chakra out across Konoha to watch the battle as it progressed, coordinating the mass of clones that were devastating the combined forces of Suna and Oto. Oh no, as quickly as he could, he created a clone. Take my place, right now, I have to dispel. Before disappearing in a cloud of smoke, he left no time for debate, conveying to the other clones in Konoha the following message. Hinata was seriously endangered before Naruto arrived and destroyed the large purple barrier. He was battling the other 4 Oto shinobi who were defending it. Orochimaru, who had attempted to call upon the previous Hokages to defend him, was the only one inside Jiraiya, and the Sandaime Naruto stopped him from desecrating Konoha's legacy. There was a foul-mouthed redhead who was currently fighting Kakashi and the cat Anbu, and she was currently losing. Naruto had a big orange-haired boy on his knees, gasping for air, next to the dead body of a blue-haired boy with 2 heads and another with 6 arms. It was at this moment that Naruto received an important piece of information, one that made him feel afraid. After creating a clone, Naruto quickly gathered chakra into his eyes, locked onto his target, and the clone returned to completing tasks on the roof before he had even given orders. The Kamui Neji had been knocked out early in the fight with a quick chop to the back of the head, and it was obvious that the boy's target was Hinata, and he was making sure to keep her alive. Hinata was doing everything she could to stop the assailant in front of her, but the silver-haired man was simply too quick, too strong, and had too many backup plans. What's the matter? Where did all that fiery passion go? You demonstrated a lot more resiliency during the exams. A kick sent Hinata skidding back along the floor after she ducked under a blow to her neck. Why are you doing this? Simply put, you are the only thing that Naruto cares about more than his mission for peace, said Kabuto, laughing and hurrying back in. Orochimaru-sama is not going to let the opportunity to control the reincarnation of the Rakudo Sennin pass him by easily. Plus, it doesn't hurt to have an unsealed Byakugan. Hinata screamed in agony and attempted to leap back to gain some space, but Kabuto leapt forward with her and struck at her chest with his arm after he was able to tap her left arm, severing the tendons and making it go limp. This will cause pain, but don't worry, it won't last forever. Please, anyone, help me, Hinata said, closing her eyes. After a few seconds, she opened her eyes to see her blonde savior holding Kabuto's wrist. Based on the boy's expression, the grip was extremely firm. The pain never materialized. One of the silliest things you could have done was to attack Hinata-chan, but to harm her? You will pay a heavy price for that? As Naruto applied more pressure to the boy's wrist, a loud crack echoed through the hallways, and Kabuto let out a hiss of pain. Naruto gripped the boy's wrist and drew him in, kneeing him in the stomach with such force that he spat up bile. The last thing he saw was Nine Tomo spinning wildly around the three rings closest to the center of Naruto's eye. Naruto let Kabuto fall to his knees, gasping for air, but he wasn't finished yet. He gripped the boy's hair painfully and pulled his head back so he looked directly into Naruto's eyes. Tsukuyomi. Unbelievably, Hinata noticed tears welling up in Naruto's eyes as he turned on his heel, scooped her into his arms, and placed her gently against the wall before even waiting for Kabuto's body to hit the ground. With his face buried in the bend of her neck, Naruto knelt beside her and gave her a tender hug. Oh Hinata, I'm so sorry. I should never have abandoned you in that manner. I'm solely to blame for your injuries. Oh Kami, you could have been. It isn't your fault, Naruto-kun, Hinata said, raising her good arm and giving him the best hug she could. Is he crying? Hinata felt a dampness on her neck and felt Naruto tremble a little. Naruto-kun. Hinata, in those seconds when I sensed Kabuto attack you, I felt a fear I haven't felt since I was strapped down in Orochimaru's lab. No, even worse than that, Naruto said, kneeling back and wiping the tears from his eyes. Love is something I have never experienced in my life and have only ever dreamed about, but this past week has given me that opportunity. Oh Kami, is he? Hinata's eyes lit up. I feel whole whenever I'm with you, and the idea of losing that makes me cry uncontrollably because I love you. Hyuga Hinata. I doubt I could ever be the same if I ever lost you. When they finally broke apart, Naruto rested his forehead on hers and simply stared into her eyes. Naruto cupped her cheek tenderly and leaned forward to give her a tender kiss, to which she returned. The two remained in that position for a few seconds, but it seemed like an eternity between them. I'll go. Naruto blinked and leaned back. What? I said I'll go with you, Hinata said, grinning and putting his hand to his cheek. I know that I want to be with you. Regardless of where we go or when we return, I can't wait for you to stay with me, but I'll accompany you if that isn't possible. In addition, who will defend the other girls? Leaning forward once more, Naruto smiled and said, there will only ever be one woman for me. He kissed her once more, closing the remaining distance. Until they heard a shifting behind them, they remained in that position. Both of them turned to see Neji pushing himself to his feet. Neji Nisan. Hinata looked back at Naruto, who was standing up to his feet and shaking his head, but a firm hand held her to the ground as she attempted to stand up and assist him. Go ahead and rest, Hinata, I'll take care of you both. The real Naruto placed a hand on Hinata's shoulder, causing her to recoil in pain, and then there was a sudden sense of relief when Naruto's hand was surrounded by a glowing green aura. A cage bunchen poofed into existence and approached Neji, encircling its hands in a glowing green chakra. I'll need a few minutes to reattach the tendons that he severed in your shoulder. It could hurt a little. As Hinata felt her muscles squirm beneath her skin, she gritted her teeth and resisted the urge to scratch. It was like an army of ants scuttling beneath her skin, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Reflexively, Hinata rubbed her shoulder and sighed, saying, thank you, Naruto-kun. Neji Nisan, how are you? Uzumaki-san is an excellent medic, and I'm all right compared to before my match. I feel better now. I sincerely appreciate your protection of Hinata-sama. Uzumaki-san, I'm indebted to you for protecting her. Eyeing the Hyuga who was bowing to the two teenagers, Naruto said, well, I'm glad your misplaced hostility toward Hinata has been put to rest. I'm relieved I wasn't compelled to take any action. Yes, I have seen the idiocy of my ways and am glad to say that I have changed, hopefully for the better, Neji said, trembling as he gazed at the traitorous Kabuto's still body. The cage bunchen from earlier grabbed Kabuto and vanished in a swirling vortex as Naruto helped Hinata up by placing her arm around his shoulder. As they walked away, Hinata turned to face the blonde and said, what did you do to Naruto-kun? I put him in a place where he won't be able to threaten anyone anytime soon, Naruto said, taking the girl's hand and squeezing it as a comfort. He won't be able to get out anytime soon because it's a place I made. In yet another vortex, a cage Bunshin suddenly materialized and declared, "The battle is over. The only enemy casualties there were from those who refused to surrender, and there were no friendly casualties." "What about the snake?" the real Naruto asked, turning to face his clone and gesturing for him to assist Hinata. "That is the only fight that hasn't been settled yet," the Bunshin said, moving forward and placing Hinata's arm on his shoulder. In addition to defeating multiple clones, he continues to battle Jiraiya and the Hokage despite being ordered to stay out of the altercation. The Anbu appears to be exhausted. Leaning forward, Naruto caught Hinata's lips once more before vanishing in a swirling vortex, leaving the Hyuga with her lips pursed. Naruto ducked out from Hinata's arm and pulled out his Shikuho once more, slamming it into the ground. With his hand extended to steady her, Neji approached his cousin and said, "Let's move, Hinata-sama. We should go to the compound before Hiashi-sama begins to worry." Neji looked at the Naruto cage Bunshin and nodded the invisible question for instant transport. The young girl had only one thought before the clone transported them through time and space to their destination. "Please, Naruto-kun, stay safe." Jiraiya was gasping for air and almost running out of chakra. How on earth did Orochimaru become so powerful, or am I simply becoming softer? I knew it was not a good idea to go through Udon no Kuni, also known as the Land of Noodles. The Sandaime was sent sailing across the roof by the momentum, leaving Jiraiya out in the open as the sword of Kusanagi came flying overhead, barely giving him time to dodge. Jiraiya ducked and watched it sail towards Hiruzen, who had Henge Kongonyoi transform, adamantite staff, and was able to block it. "You have become weak, you idiot, and now you will pay for getting in my way, along with that senile fucker you call a Hokage," Orochimaru said, drawing back his sword and lunging at Jiraiya. There was a loud clank just as Jiraiya was about to be run through, and Naruto with his Shikuho was in front of the Sannin, blocking the sword. "So, my experiment shows me what fruits it has produced. I'll be happy to demonstrate to you that power can be revoked just as readily as it can be bestowed." As he pushed Orochimaru away, Naruto maintained his unflappable expression. "You think that my power was yours to give," he said. "I am who I am today because Jubi-sama thought me deserving of the same status as Hagoromo-sama. For what it's worth, I thank you for being the link to that power. However, because of your sins, I must demand your death in order to save thousands of others. I hope the next life brings you peace." "Better brats than you have tried," Orochimaru laughed. The binding snake glare spell, or Jage Jubaku. Naruto's Shikuho swiftly decapitated two snakes that were flying toward him, and Orochimaru tsked and launched a number of additional snakes at Naruto. Many hidden shadow snake hands, or Sene Tajashu. Sighing, the blonde flashed through multiple sets of hand seals. Kaden. Fire release. Great Dragon Fire Technique, Goryuka no Jutsu. Orochimaru was engulfed in fire by a dragon's head wreathed in flame, which devoured the snakes. As the fire died down, the body inside turned to dust, and another Orochimaru emerged from the roof. A Bunshin, finding out that the legendary Orochimaru of the Sannin is actually just a one-trick pony, just snakes, snakes, and more snakes, is disheartening. This was one of the rare occasions when the Habi Sannin was insulted to his capacity. "You arrogant brat. I brought you into this world, which is why you are who you are. I granted you all of your current power. Don't you think for a moment that I don't have plans to mix the various chakras of the Biju again? I spent years researching this topic." Naruto grinned and said, "Well, I appreciate you confirming my suspicions because it saved me months of looking for information on the black market. I'm afraid I can't abandon you now that I know." Grabbing his staff, Naruto charged forward, swung his weapon too quickly for the Sannin to avoid, severing him in two, with the top half connecting with the bottom half with a bridge of snakes. Naruto jumped back, watching in disgust. "Nice try, but those two fools before tried the same thing," grinned Orochimaru. Naruto brought his right fist and struck Orochimaru's gut, causing the snake Sannin to hiss in pain and leap away. Orochimaru leapt forward and threw a punch at Naruto's face with his right hand, but the blonde knocked the punch away with the top of his left hand. "Bansho Tenin, heavenly attraction of all of creation," Naruto said, raising his hand. With his arm outstretched, Orochimaru could do little to stop his body from flying in the direction of the blonde, but Naruto caught him by the throat and held him in midair. Asura Path. Naruto collected chakra in the palm of his hand holding Orochimaru up, and two mechanical arms emerged from the arm holding him up in the air, grabbing Orochimaru's two arms to ensure he could not form any hand seals. "Goodbye, Orochimaru. This is the end. Darkness Hole, or Anketsu." It was a very painful process, and Orochimaru knew immediately that this was the end. He was going to die here, By an experiment gone wrong, Orochimaru's face twisted in horror as he felt something strong and heavy emerge on his neck, as if it were a force drawing him in on himself, as if it were sucking him into the single point on his neck. No, 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 I can't die here, I didn't. I'm immortal. No one is immortal, Orochimaru, not even me in all my power, Naruto said, sneering as he held the man as he was drawn into the expanding black vortex. All of us are destined to die. But that is what makes life so unique. We all strive to live each day to the fullest because we know that death could happen at any time. It's unfortunate that you only discovered that at the very end. Since he was finally gone in the next few seconds, his entire being compressed and smashed in a space of infinite gravity that trapped time itself, Naruto dispelled the jutsu with a sigh, happy that the entire event was finally over. Among the mindless screams and pleas to let him go, Naruto honestly heard tones of regret, though he had no way of knowing if it was regret for his past actions or regret towards his impending death. Thanks, Gaki. I don't think we would have survived if you hadn't showed up, Jiraiya said, limping over to the blonde and massaging his broken ribs. I'm relieved that it's all over, even though I don't know how he became so powerful. With a sigh, Naruto picked up his staff and explained, he has been using Biju Chakra to augment his body, which has given him various abilities and increased his strength overall. His power dwarf even that of a cage, but it is useless against me. His body would start tearing itself to pieces in a matter of months, and he would never have the power I do. With a nod, Jiraiya approached the unconscious cage and lifted him onto his shoulders, saying, I'll handle everything from now on. You go relax. As agreed upon, we will meet at the front gates in 3 days. Naruto grinned and said, yes, if you want to go with me, you'll have to recuperate before I forget. Hinata-chan will be joining us. Jiraiya smiled lustfully. Oh, I take it that your girlfriend will accompany us? I'm hoping that's the only sense of arrival that occurs. What we do in our private time is our business and our business alone, Naruto said, squinting his eyes. I will personally make sure that Orochimaru has a companion to enjoy the wonders of infinite gravity with. If I even remotely sense your chakra signature, do I express myself clearly? With a nervous nod, Jiraiya said, okay, geez, don't be so harsh on me. I was just kidding. I believe I will have plenty of work to keep me occupied, so go see your girlfriend. That was our arrangement, Jiraiya, Naruto said with a laugh. I'll let you travel with us and train under me, and you'll handle the council and any resistance to my leaving the village, just like you've done before. The older gentleman admitted, yeah, it's just that I never thought I would ever subject myself to training under a Gaki. It is an honor to be trained by the Nadaime Rakuto Sennin. I know people who would literally give an arm and a leg to have an arrangement such as yours, Naruto said, laughing once more. And Jiraiya, too. What is it, Gaki? The older man asked, looking up. With a smile, Naruto said, it's Gaki-sensei to you. 2 elderly men were standing alone on a roof when the blonde vanished in a whirling whirlpool. What have I gotten myself into, dear lord?
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.